Hey guys, it's Jeff from Home Renovision here, and today we are bringing a video to you I think is going to be really valuable. It's going to be all about kitchens. How to remodel a kitchen for less than $3,000. Yeah, you got it. Not everybody's in a huge renovation marketplace, and so today's video is dedicated for how will you make your kitchen fresh and new and gorgeous again without spending a fortune. Bottom line, we don't have a kitchen to do this video on. So what we're doing is we're combining a lot of information from different videos that we've done, and we're gonna give you the real cost. Less than 3,000 bucks, you can remodel your kitchen and make it look brand new and spectacular. Yes, it can be done. So we're gonna go into the video series to show you all the tips and tricks so you can accomplish that goal and you can do it yourself. So one of the most dramatic things that you can do in your home for increasing not only just the value, but its physical appearance and your durability is to paint your kitchen cabinets. So let's get into this because there's a lot of ground to cover. There are a lot of different kinds of cabinets that are made. And let's start with the doors because you have two basic things going on. You have a door and you've got the box. In this case, our door is solid wood and our box is a melamine or a particle board with a vinyl finish on it, okay? So you have a lot of different kinds of surfaces that all need to be treated differently when you're painting your project. Now, solid wood is simple. It's wood, right? You're gonna paint it. But this product here, right away, you know this has got a stain. It's like a whitewashed oak. If this was a new product, then whitewashed oak might be a water-based stain, it might be an oil-based stain. So that's the first question you gotta solve. Because no matter how much sanding you do on oak, because of the texture, you're always going to have some of that finish sitting there unless you use a chemical stripper. So sanding isn't enough. You need to know what products you're gonna use so that you get the right kind of bond. Now, before we get started, we wanna go up to the bathroom and steal this from your wife, or if you use this yourself, make sure that you have a nail polish remover with acetone, or you might even have acetone in your garage for basic cleaning. And what you want to do is just take this and rub it on the surface of the door and see if anything comes off. In that case, that's a no. If acetone doesn't remove the surface, then the surface is oil-based. Problem solved. And I can demonstrate that by doing this, because the client had previously done some paint work here. Okay, there we go. Now there's the brown paint that she had put on the inside of that door as a test for color, and she hated it, by the way. But just to demonstrate that that technique works really well for helping you identify if it's going to be a water-based or an oil-based product. Once we have that problem solved, we know how to move forward with our products, but the techniques are interesting. Wood, you use light sanding. With the vinyl, you have to go extremely light sanding and you have to use the right kind of primer. So we'll get into all those products later in the project, but for now, let's start from the beginning and what you need to do to prep your kitchen. First of all, what we need to do is we need to remove all the doors because you don't want to do the painting in the room you're working in. This is going to take a few days and it's going to make a lot of mess. So what you want to do is you want to find a place in your house where you can set up a station to paint all of these things. Depending on the time of year and the temperature and the humidity, you might want to use a garage, you might be able to use the basement, you might be able to just throw some tarps down in your living room and set up a workstation there. But I would suggest not trying to do this job in the kitchen because you still need to live and that means you need to eat. So what I want to do is I want to make my life simple. Because there are so many doors and drawers, I want to just get a piece of tape on everything in this kitchen and I want to mark down my numbers. I start in the top left, just like reading a book, left to right, and you number everything off so that everything goes back where it came from. That way, you don't have to readjust all your doors and drawers after you reinstall them because they're going to be able to be in the same condition as they're in now. Okay, so the beginning of the project is quite simple. Now we have all of our doors numbered. We have a workstation set up that we're going to be doing all the work in. And we now have to remove all of these doors. Most of the hardware nowadays is really simple. It has a quick release tab in the back. Okay, and you can just pop it off. Now, if that's not the case, You might have hardware where you've got to put your Phillips bit on an adjustable screw here, and then you can slide it off and leave the hardware on the wall. Your worst case scenario, if that's not the case, and it's a hinge that's screwed to the cabinet and then screwed to the door, and it doesn't have a releasing mechanism, you may need to undo the screws that are attached to your door, and then remove the door from the hardware entirely and leave all the hardware attached to the cabinet. That's fine. If you have a cabinet that's got a picture frame or a surface that's going to get painted as well, so we want to remove all the hardware from all of our surfaces, and that's as simple as pulling the screws. And try not to lose them. There we go. And you'll see that they just pop right out, okay? Now, just a quick note, if you have a kitchen cabinet that has an IKEA hinge on it, it has a locking cam mechanism that actually causes little rubber pieces in the back here to expand. So all you do is you would take a knife and pry that locking mechanism up, and then it pops out. There's no screws involved in that system at all. But here we go. Now, these little plastic things here are actually really, really important. They're like a plug that's in the oak wood to receive the screw. So when we're refinishing these cabinets, we want to leave these plugs alone. Make sure you leave them in there, because you don't want to have to come back later and take all that out. The only thing I would suggest is remove the little tabs that are on here that keep the door from being really noisy when you close it, and you want to remove your handle. And pull the screw out. Now when you're refinishing your kitchen, if you want to keep the hardware and put the same hardware back on, you're going to save a lot of steps. But if your hardware dates your kitchen and you want to put in something new, then you have an opportunity. You can save this hole and drill a new hole with new hardware later. Or if you already have pulls on your doors and you have 2 holes, buy hardware with the same dimension on it. Okay, so if it's a 3-inch, buy 3-inch handles. And that way you won't have to do any filling and sanding and repairing of the door before you get moving forward. If they're in good shape and you're going to keep your hardware, this is a real quick process, okay? What you want to have your Ziploc bag. I prefer the freezer bags because they're really hardy. And you just throw all that in there. All your screws and bits. Okay? Close that up. Get out your marker and put on here number 6. This is really important because all of your doors and drawers that are in here are going to be set especially for that piece of the cabinet. You don't have to come back and make all your adjustments all over again. Now, if your cabinets need to be adjusted, you can throw them all in the same bag and you can do all your adjusting when you're finished. But in this case, these doors are actually lined up pretty good. So I want to just kind of keep things simple. The only other thing you might want to do is take your marker and put a little mark on the hinge. And that'll mark whether it's the top or the bottom for you. There we go. Very unique. Just gonna get a lot of these out of the sight line. Okay. So you can see it doesn't take long to pull a kitchen apart if you got the quick release. You just spend more time on the other side taking all the hardware off the doors. But this is it. Now your kitchen is prepped. The only thing we're going to be painting in this kitchen because of this style is the actual little bits of facade that are on the side of the cabinets that are showing. You know, this little valance, I think the side of the pantry door over there is going to have to be repainted as well. But because the doors take so much more prep, what I want to do is I want to get all the doors prepped, do those until we're ready to start painting, and then we can come back and do a little bit of prep on this in the morning, and we can paint everything all at the same time. It's going to be probably a 3 to 4 day project, just because we like to make sure we let it all sit. The time of year that we're in is about springtime, it's high moisture in the air, and because we're using a water-based paint, we want to give it lots of time to set up and dry properly, so that we don't want to rush things and then have a problem. Now here's a trick. We have a microwave shelf, and this is just the veneer. So what I'm going to do is I'm actually going to remove this, and I'm going to go pick up a piece of solid pine and cut it to fit this space and paint it like the rest of the cabinetry. Because I know that even after this plastic vinyl here that's covering all the doors, after this stuff is painted, it's not durable, no matter what you do. We can give it a bit of texture, we can paint it nice, and it'll look pretty, but it's not very durable, so it's not good for a shelf. So what you want to do is you take your drill, and underneath, there's going to be 4 set screws usually. There we go. And these are cabinet screws, and they have a washer head on them. They're generally around 3/4 of the thickness of the 2 layers of material added together, and that's all they use to attach it. So you can replace those 4, and you can actually save them for later just by putting them back in with a quick little twist. Now that I have my microwave shelf, I'm not going to just pitch it in the garbage. I'm going to save this as a template so that I can use this to make my shelf replacement. Now, drawers are a little bit different because there's a drawer face and then there's a drawer. And we want to remove the face from the drawer itself. And in this case, it's 5 screws. And we're going to have to, well, that's a knife. All right, we're going to have to get some space in here. And we want to first take the handle off. Okay. Then we have 4 set screws that are holding the face to the drawer. We want to remove these screws only halfway. Well, would you look at that? These drawer faces are not just screwed on, they are stapled on as well. So unfortunately, if I try to take that door face off, I'm going to run the risk of damaging this drawer itself. The drawer is made of 1/2-inch particle board material. I'm not going to take the chance that I'm going to be able to remove that without destroying the drawer, and that causes a brand new kind of issue. So what I'm going to do for now is I'm going to treat all of these drawers, and they have to be site finished where they are. I'm just going to see which ones I want to leave in the kitchen and which ones I'm going to take out to the shop entirely. I think the homeowner is going to be able to appreciate having access to their silverware. Oh my. So what we're going to do is we're going to finish these drawer faces attached to their cabinet. When we come and take care of all of these other parts of the facade, we're going to take all the doors off site. These are actually a lot simpler to finish because they don't have all the detail. All right, so this is actually quite easy to sand with a palm sander. One of the reasons I want to take all of the door faces away and take it to my shop is because the contour in this panel, it takes a lot of work actually to take the stain and get the finish off of there and do it effectively. So that requires a little bit more precision than just throwing a palm sander on it, and I want to have it in a different environment. This is going to be simple. I can set up my palm sander on a vacuum, come in and give this a good scuff with the transition primer, and it'll perform just fine. But this is a lot more work, trying to make sure all these nooks and crannies here are filled in and sanded properly. So I'm just going to finish taking the rest of my doors off, get them loaded into my truck to take back to my workshop, and then we'll meet you back there to continue on with the process of how to prep these things up and get them all painted. So we're back at the shop now, and I'm going to go through all the steps that are necessary in order to take it from this to a beautiful piece of finished painted wood. Now, when you have to be careful of a couple things when you get started. One, these little door stops, you want to get these removed because you can see the unfinished wood underneath there. All right, so those, garbage. You can go to the store when we're all finished and we can buy a package of brand new stops, and we'll apply those when we install the doors at the very end of the project. But for now, here we are. Looks like we're ready to sand, except for one thing. We need to clean this first. Because it comes from a kitchen, depending how old it is and what kind of condition your cabinets are in, you are going to have varying degrees of cleaning necessary here. But you don't want to start sanding until you've cleaned, because natural wood doors have got texture. And that texture, if you put a sand pad to it, it's going to start rubbing all of that grease into the grain. All right, you're going to trap it there, and then when you go to paint, you're going to be very disappointed with the results. So the type of cleaner that you want to use depends on the person and the condition of the situation, but generally, like a TSP, like a trisodium phosphate, they come in powder, you mix it yourself, or they also come in spray form. I just went down and I grabbed an all-purpose degreaser because I'm not looking for a chemical like a TSP where I've got to actually wash it off when I'm done. This is you just spray and wipe and walk away. They're in good shape, They aren't very greasy. There's no real surface dirt, not covered in tomato sauce. I'm not expecting a big issue. So we're just gonna spray that on liberally, and we're just gonna wipe it off with our Blue Shop towels. And what I'm looking for here is just a physical inspection of this rag when I'm done, and then I can find out how much dirt is on there. Now that's pretty darn clean. So as a result, I'm not gonna spend all day long trying to wash my wood. I'm just gonna take this wet rag, double check the sides. You're gonna be surprised, majority of the dirt is gonna be right around where the handle is from people's hands, all right? And on the back side here, that'll be where most of the dirt is. Once we've got this cleaned up, now we're ready to sand. So for sanding, there's a couple of products you're gonna need. One is an orbital sander, and you can get these where they go in circles or vibrating, okay? So either one will do the job. If you get the kind that just vibrates, you can actually buy these with a square or a triangular tip, and that can be real beneficial for getting into the corners. But because we have a detailed door, we're gonna need a sanding sponge as well. And the reason for that is we wanna actually get that sponge, press it into the detail, and then sand out the detail. Okay? Now here's the thing. We already tested this. We know it's an oil-based. Yes, you could get chemical strippers involved and you can go crazy. I don't think it's necessary. Technology today makes it so that it's not necessary to take this back all the way to the bare wood. What we want to do here is just transition it into a new product that we can finish and that's going to have the resistance and that wear and tear that we're looking for. So we're just looking to scuff this up so that we have a texture that'll receive our transition primer. Once we have that texture, we can move forward instead of having to go back to the chemical strippers. If you're going to use an orbital sander, of course, we have to take precaution. There's a lot of fine dust being kicked out by that. So you wear your mask, okay? If you're dealing with really old cabinets, or if you're adding new products that are solvent-based, buy this one, okay? This is good for all of those odors as well that are dangerous in the air. This is just the particulate mask. This will take care of the odor as well. We're not going to be using solvents, so I'm not worried about it. I'll just wear this version of the diaper. Woo, like a glove. This sander has two adapters. One is a cartridge filter, and that can attach, and then you're just running the dust right into this box. The other adapter is here, and this is actually designed to be attached to your vacuum. So you can actually vacuum while you're sanding. For the purpose of what we're doing here today, I'm going to avoid turning that vacuum on because that just gets a little bit too loud. And we're not really making a whole lot of a mess. Yeah, for sanding the surfaces, orbital sander, I'm using a 150, 120 grit. That's plenty. You don't have to go any more coarse than that. The only trick here is you want to line up the holes, relatively speaking, because that's what the vacuum is going to be sucking all the dust through the holes and then through your filter. If you don't line them up, the dust is going to go everywhere. Now you want to do your best to sand with the grain, and again, we're not taking it back down to bare wood, we're just scuffing the surface to get ready for transition primer. So don't over sand, you don't need to spend all day long on this process. Make sure you do all your sides, and of course the entire back. Generally speaking, the back of the door doesn't get a lot of wear and tear, but it's that one time, if you don't sand this before you do your transition primer, it's that one time a plate or a ring from someone's hand is going to scratch across that. If you don't prep it properly, it's going to disappoint you, so take the time and do it right. Now just a word, this particular hardware has plastic caps that went inside a pre-drilled hole. I'm going to do my best not to damage those or remove them, because when I put the hardware back on, there's nothing there to be worried about. I'm actually only going to see the context around it. So when I'm sanding, when I'm painting, everything, I'm going to leave these here and work around them, and I'm not going to be too concerned about what happens inside that area. When you're done sanding, take your cloth, put a little bit of your degreaser on there, and just wipe over your surface. Basically, what you're doing is just trying to remove the dust and the debris from the surface. That's all, so that our transition primer isn't going to be competing with the dust that's on there in order to get a good grab. The other thing you can do is you can hook up your air compressor with a blower and give it a good shot with that if you have one handy. That is a great way to finish this as well. Okay, so now we've got our sanding finished. It's time for our transition primer. This is a product I use by Dulux, and it works amazing, and I love it. And so what I need is a paint tray, and I need a roller. Now, I've seen a lot of videos that talk about using these foam rollers when you're doing cabinetry work, but I'll be honest with you, I would prefer going with this 10mm microfiber. Foam rollers to me just seem to pick up too much air bubbles and cause a texture issue, and you don't get that nice smooth finish you're looking for. So I'm going to use this bad boy, but my paint tray is a disaster and I am out of liners. So I'm going to show you a paint trick. Oh my goodness. Take your paint tray, put it in the garbage bag, instant liner, okay? Now, if you don't own a 5-in-1 tool and you're going to paint, go buy one. This cleans rollers, opens cans, helps to repair the drywall, puts dents so you can fill them up, and it is the easiest way to open up a can of paint. All right. Try to portion out what you think you're going to use. And there we go. I know this is crazy. If you can remove the paint from inside that edge, then you can close that lid over and over and over again without having any issues. Okay, so try to clean that out as best you can. Give that a tap. Now I buy these little nitrile gloves for doing stain work and that sort of thing. And I'll be honest with you, I generally don't paint with gloves on, but this process is going to take a few hours. And I'm going to be going back and forth between a couple different kinds of paint. And I'm going to be touching a lot of edge, okay? Let's face it, these cabinet doors are tiny. There's a lot of detailed work here. And since I'm going to be taking a lot of edges and painting them here and then transferring to a drying station, I just thought, you know, this one time I'll wear the gloves. All right, here we go. Brush and roll, right? So the idea is, like anything else, you want to fill up inside the brush, okay? And then take the extra off. Less is more, and you want to paint from inside the brush, not the outside. It'll reduce your drips, okay? And the whole point here is start in the edge, and you work your way towards the middle from both corners. So you put it in the edge, and you pull towards the middle. All right, making sure to get it in the crack, because these are two separate pieces of wood. So you want to get that nicely filled. I would hesitate trying to fill it with any kind of caulking. It's going to cause you a great deal of regret. It's not going to finish nice. Now, if you get any brush lines, make sure you pull them out, okay? There we go. Now, I'm going to show you another trick. Because this channel is full of nothing but tips and tricks. This is my new favorite friend. I love this product. I've been using it for years. Anytime I'm doing a minor patch or stain kill or anything that I need a good solid primer, my favorite trick for this is actually an old set of stairs. I can spray all of this down on the oil paint and then finish a couple of coats of latex over top of it and make it look brand new. If you want to make your life simple, this one can will do a kitchen. Now, I'm not going to suggest you spray the entire door with this, but because the detail that's in this door, if you want to make your life easy, you can use this as a spray primer just for the detail. And this is a shellac-based paint, and it is like a spray paint, of course, so it will drip and it will run. And if you have any of that, just wipe it off out of the way and then let it dry. Okay? If you get proficient with this kind of product, you can prime all of this detail in just a few minutes, and it'll save you a lot of time and effort. All right? Of course, in order to finish your priming, you can use the brush on these edges here. All right? I'm going to suggest that you do all four sides of the edge while you have this out. okay? And you want to follow with the grain. And don't worry too much about the texture of the surface. We are going to sand between coats, so don't get hung up on that. If you have paint pooling in a corner or you have a big bubble, by all means get it, but don't worry about brush lines. Just want to clean all this up. There we go. Look at this. I'm still working from inside that one brush. Amazing how much paint a brush will hold. Once I have all 5 sides done, I'm going to pull out this thing here, my trusty roller, and I'm going to roll the inside. I've already got lint. That's great. Now you'll see the process here. You're going to have a lot more paint on here than you want, okay? And this is the danger, and this is why I'm showing you the hard way first. There's more paint there than you want as a surface primer. All right? If you're not careful, you're also going to get it all over your edging. And you're going to be back and forth like this all day long, just priming up your door. Not necessary. So the way you solve this problem of having too much paint on a door is sand all your doors first, and then when they're ready to go, cut all of your edges. Then go back and put some paint on, and then go to the next door. Do 2 or 3 at once with the full roller. And then you can come back and stretch it all out, okay? And you'll see that when your roller is dry, you have a lot more control. You can even do all of the flat surfaces if you don't want to use your brush. Okay? Again, it comes down to comfort, but I prefer to do all my flat surfaces with the roller instead of a brush. Now all we do is take this, set it to our drying area, and you can set this up anywhere you like. I think the best for me that I found is just get a couple of 2x4s, lay them on the ground in a corner, and stack all your doors across that. And that's a perfect way to let them dry. It takes about a half an hour. So once your door is primed and it has dried completely, usually let it have a good couple of hours. Don't be in a hurry here because you are going to use a mechanical sanding machine and you don't want to sand all of this off real easily. If it hasn't had time to dry and bond properly, you're going to be disappointed and have to paint them all over again. So what I would suggest, if you have the time and the patience, prime everything one day and then do your first coat the next day and then your second coat after lunch. And here's why. We are going to be switching out our sandpaper and we're going to go from our 120, gotta love the hook loop, and we're going to switch that over to the 220. Now I like to buy them in different colors because then it keeps me honest and I don't forget that I got to switch it out. Again, line up the holes, get ready to go. Once we're sanded, we're going to be using the Dulux melamine paint. I've seen a couple of videos done with this kind of product and they're talking about using something that's not an eggshell, but it's not semi-gloss, somewhere in the middle. This product here, it's amazing. It's a melamine paint, so it gets you that nice smooth finish without the semi-gloss shine. It's also got additives in there, so it's really, really durable, and it'll really help your kitchen cabinets perform. So if you haven't seen this product used before, feel free to stop by the Dulux stores or PPG Paints and have them talk to you about the benefits of this. I love this stuff. I've worked on it before doing some custom work in kitchens, and really pleased with the results. Because we're sanding, I should put this back on my face. God help us all. Okay, here we are. Now, we've got our 220 pad, and again, this is really simple. We're just trying to take off any little bumps that are sitting in the paint so that we have a nice surface texture. I'm not trying to take this back to the wood, of course. Just a quick run. And that is it. The other option that you have, of course, and you'll see that even with just doing that, it exposed a couple of spots. The other option, of course, is just take a sanding block. You can get these medium or fine grit, or if you have a medium grit and that's old, keep these handy in case you ever get this project. And you can just pass it over the surface real quick. Okay. Whenever we're painting between coats, the goal here is not to create a texture that'll bond. It's not to do anything other than to take off ridges and bumps, okay? So same thing, get the corner right in that groove, just to help guarantee you're defining that space. Okay, anything that looks like it's a blemish, address it that. There we go. Of course, when you're done, tack cloth or use a little air pressure. That'll do the job. Now, same process, okay? I would suggest you start fill your brush with paint on the inside, and then you're just gonna push it into the corner and then pull, all right? And then just clean it all up. Make sure that there's no ridges, all right? There we go. Now, painting a cabinet door is actually relatively simple. It's just time consuming. And the secret is in not using too much paint. And the way we deal with that is I'm painting the trim area here, the detail, but then I'm taking the brush and I'm painting the outside of this picture framing as well while I'm at it. And the reason I'm doing that is because this gives me the ability to get rid of the excess paint that's stuck in that brush. So I'm not leaving it all in the ridges and I'm not causing drips. All right. So here's my process. I get it in the corner and pull, all right? Now, I'm going to pull in the direction of the grain here. And I'm also going to paint the edge with the excess paint that's left on this surface here. One of the things you want to be careful of when you're painting is this concept of less is more. You might take a little bit of experience, but you really need to trust the technology that's in the paint. Nowadays, this paint acts like a self-leveler. You put it on, and then it'll spread out while it's drying. It gets rid of all these brush lines, and it gets really good coverage. A good quality paint gives you such good coverage that you don't hardly need any to get the result that you want. And it allows you to still see the grain of the wood underneath the paint. There we go. That is absolutely beautiful. Okay, now the same thing with the door. I'm using a 10 mil roller, and this one I didn't load up. You'll see how there's hardly any paint on there. Same thing. I'm going to take the time to stretch this out for the purpose of our demonstration here. I don't want to run it up against the edges. Now you'll see, I don't know how well that shows on camera, but I hardly brought any paint over here at all. And I can just run this back and forth all day long. And before you know it, it's been stretched out and everything is completely covered. Look at that. Now, to duplicate the same texture on the sides, just run it over real quick so that you don't have a different texture left from the roller and the brush on your flat surfaces. Done. Now we want to, of course, do the sides as well. This is easy sometimes. You just use the roller again all the way around. When it's dry, there'll be just enough paint left in that roller that you can do that. And then you want to let this sit for a few hours. I would suggest probably 5 or 6. Overnight again is better. The more patient you are, the better the result. Come back, take your sand block, give it a quick shot just in case there's any more dust in the area, and then give it one more coat, and that is all you need. Now if you want, when you're all finished, you can go back with a lacquer finish, but like I said, if you're using a regular latex paint, you probably need some sort of a lacquer or a finish coat to protect the door. But if you're using a melamine paint from Dulux, you don't need that step. It'll save you a lot of time and aggravation. It also makes touching up your cabinets at a later date really, really simple because you can keep this stuff stored. And if you ever do have damage during your install, you can actually take the time to fix it and you don't have to worry about matching your lacquer as well as your paint. There we go. So the other type of process that you're going to see in your kitchen, most wooden kitchens are going to have fillers, valances, microwave shelves like this one here. And in most cases, or even the exposed side of a cabinet, most cases, the price point that kitchens are purchased at, you're not going to get these in solid wood and stained. A lot of the fillers and miscellaneous trim boards are all basically an MDF material with a vinyl skin. We'll call it plastic, okay? So you can't take a mechanical sander or a 220 and sand that down. It'll just eat a hole right through the thing, and you're gonna run into trouble. So what you wanna do is take some steel wool. Now this is not the coarse stuff, this is actually for fine woodworking. 4-0 is actually used when you have a piece of wood that's covered in varathane, some sort of a finish like that, and you wanna just polish it up. And you can just polish it up and get rid of all the dirt and bumps and make it shine. That's what this is for. And this is what we're gonna use here. We're actually gonna just rub it in circles. And the idea here is we're gonna allow this steel wool to create our bonding texture for our primer. Because we can use a transition primer on this kind of material, just like we did on the wood, because it's designed to bond just about anything to anything. Now it's not going to look any different, it's not going to feel any different, but know that once you've done the steel wool application, you're going to have just enough texture there that you can take your paint and you can roll, okay? The fact that this is even rolling means there's texture on there. If there was no texture, it would just slide across like a big smear. But the fact that I can dry roll this means that that worked. Here we go. I got just enough texture, even dry rolling. That is brilliant. And again, what we're doing here is we're relying on the technology of the materials that we're using. We're not relying on the texture of the surface. This transition primer, once it gets a chance to bond properly and cure, and your finished coat of paint gets a chance to cure, you'll be able to put this microwave shelf back on, and slide your microwave in place, and it's not going to cause any damage at all. Okay, so once your transition primer is dried, go back to your mechanical sander. You can then use your 220 sandpaper just like any other painted surface. Again, when we're doing our sanding in between coats, what we're dealing with is the surface of what's painted, not what's underneath. So all of a sudden, now that we've got our transition primer on here, we have a brand new surface, so just treat it like any other painted surface and you'll be fine. Okay, so we are back on the job site today. Today is the day we have to handle all these little miscellaneous elements. The skins beside the hood fan, gables on the cabinets, that sort of thing. So I guess your first step is clean out your room. We gotta remove the fridge, we gotta remove the hood fan, and then we can TSP all of those surfaces, make sure they're also free from grease. Double check, quick note, nowadays, a lot of the kick plates around the cabinets are also done in a vinyl skin, so that's the way it is here. That has to be cleaned and painted as well. Don't miss that element. I know it's underneath the cabinet, but if you miss that today, a couple weeks from now, you'll be sitting down for dinner, look across the room and go, oh my God, look how ugly that is. So we're gonna prep the room, make sure it's all ready to go. Use a couple of black garbage bags on top of the counters and appliances. That way it acts like a drop cloth. I like to use the black bag just because if I have a drip or I see I'm making a mess, it's really obvious to me. Once we get that done and we clean all of our surface, then we're going to sand all of these vinyl skins again. Now we showed you earlier in the video that we use a little bit of steel wool for that. We have a large surface, so you can use a sanding disc. I like to use 120 grit, but don't put it on the sander. Just use it by hand, okay? So just grab a hold of it and use it as a hand sand. Again, we're just lightly scuffing the surface so that it'll hold to the bonding primer. And then once we get all of that done, then we can start getting our first coat of paint on. And then it's just a matter of hanging the doors and making sure it's all level. So let's get working. Okay, so we're gonna remove the hood fan because we have skins on both sides and just a little bit of space, but not enough to get a brush and roller in there. And we don't want to try to maneuver back and forth. We just want to remove it and then reinstall it. Now we've got a video about how to change your hood fan in our library, so you can check the little icon that looks like a magnifying glass, put in hood fan, and then there'll be a description, probably a link at the end of this video. Max, I'm sure will take care of that. That way you can follow that step along. Yep, typical, there's no moret there. Be very careful in messing with this stuff because you don't want to blow yourself up. So, like an idiot, I forgot my degreaser today when I came. Lucky for me, the client had her TSP. This is the new TSP product. It's an environmentally safe version. My guess is that they had some issues with the political correctness of phosphates. So they've corrected that, which is lovely. So it's just a part mix with warm water. And we don't need a lot of scrubbing here. We're just gonna make sure that our surface is somewhat clean. Again, just removing the grease because we're not going to use a lot of mechanical sanding. Want to make sure we got a good surface to bond to. So the next step, of course, is to sand, and this is 150 grit, and I'm just going to go like this, just using my hands like a sanding block. Again, you can see on the surface, if you're going especially in a circular motion, you'll see the scratches, and this is how you know you've scratched it up, okay? So like this, you maybe can't see what you're doing, but if you go circular, if you're going up against the wall, just fold your paper in half and put your hand in the way so it acts like a guide so you're not going to scratch the wall. Set that and go. So then when you're done, before you paint, just take a damp cloth or a tack cloth and just wipe real quick to get the dust off the surface. There's no sense painting that in because then that's just one more thing you're going to have to sand off later. So again, this is our transition primer. We're going to be cutting and rolling. Now, cutting is just a fancy word for using a brush to draw a line without making a mess. So we're going to put the heel of the brush in on the angled brush and then push the tip. So go heel the tip. Then we're going to run a brush line down the side of that cabinet so that we don't make a mess on the wall. If you follow this technique, you won't have to use tape and seal everything off. And now if you want to, you could tape everything off, of course, but I prefer to brush by cutting in. I find I can paint just as fast as most people can tape off a room. I can have the whole room painted. So I've learned not to use tape when I paint, even on something like this. Now when you get to the front of this cabinet, we don't want to paint the surface, all right? And if you use the roller here, you're going to make a mess. So use your brush and cut that edge as well. And the secret here of not getting any paint on it is when you get to the bottom, if the metal part of your brush stays level with the bottom of the surface, the bristles will all be coming away. If you go down like this, they'll curl underneath and make a mess on the bottom of the cabinet. All right, so same thing here. We're going to go down and pull a heel off. All right. Now we have our edge defined. We can take the roller, but basically, there you go. With a little bit of pressure, you want to just kind of move whatever paint you have there around to even out your texture. Here we go. When you're done your surface, take a cloth, set it up, and just do a quick run down each edge. See, look at that, I found a little bit of paint. Do the bottom as well. Ah, nice and clean. Better to do it now. It's hard to clean this transition primer off later if you find it. So keep it clean as you go because it is a transition primer and this really bonds to just about anything. Do some of this without getting any paint on the wall. Again, when you're painting with a brush, you want to paint from the paint that's inside the brush, not on the outside. Make sure you force the paint inside the brush, and then you can draw a line with your brush. So you can see that in the beginning we taped all the doors and drawers off because we were going to remove the faces. And I'll just take this out, usually that easy. You can see on the camera that it had these 4 screws in the corner as well as the screw that holds the handle. We started taking it apart and I realized, well, there's a staple on here as well in all 4 corners. And the actual material on this drawer is quite thin on the front of the face. So here was my concern. If I try to take the face off, I've got staples, I'm going to have damage that's going to be hard to correct. And if they use any adhesive on this as well, when they stapled it, we're going to run the risk of causing damage to this drawer that I can't repair. So what we did is we decided to leave it, and we'll do all of this together when we come in to do the skins. So what we're going to do is we're going to leave the garbage bags on the counter now that we got this area done. We'll save the hardware for later. So we're prepping our drawer by removing the door hardware, taking off the little silent stops that go on the back for when you close. Of course, we're going to get our TSP out. This is usually the dirtiest part on any cabinet, is right around the handle. All across the top, we're gonna have oils from people's hands. Want to get all that wiped up. Okay, and then we're gonna want to sand. Now, in this situation, you could use your orbital sander, but because I'm painting in this room, I don't want to be doing anything that's kicking the dust up in the air, so I'm just gonna use a hand sanding block. And you want to make sure you get every one of these surfaces. Preparation is really the key here, folks. Just because you have a great product like a transition primer doesn't mean you get to get lazy. Everything can always bond a little bit better, be a little bit cleaner, be a little bit more scuffed up. So take your time. Although it feels like it takes a long time, if you try to cut a corner with your sanding, you're going to be really disappointed with the results at the end of the day. And honestly, it takes a whole minute a drawer. It's worth the investment. There we go. Take my rag, I'm just going to get the extra dust off. And then once again, we're going to cut and roll the entire surface while it's attached. Really want to just get all these edges. And I'm going to suggest not using a roller on all these edges, or you're going to create so many drips that have to be cleaned up. You'll just be running around in circles. So once again, I'm using a garbage bag as a tray liner. I love my garbage bags, but this roller fell into the big soup. So I'm using the 5-1, the curve edge, and I'm literally trying to take out as much of this paint as I can. Okay, off this roller before I paint the door face. I don't want to have this thing saturated, or it'll just be like sliding around, making a huge mess. So now that we have this pretty much dried out, I'm not even using any pressure. Look at how much paint is coming off that roller. Okay, so now when I apply pressure, it's in order to get coverage, and I'm not going to be forcing paint to be dripping off all the edges. So dry rolling your primer is definitely a good idea. There we go. All right, Max wants to see if I can do this left-handed. Well, it's not as easy. I usually got to hold myself still. But the same concept applies. Clean, just brush from inside. And it's all about technique here, not speed. Watch the heel of the brush. I am not left-handed. But if you follow the technique, it doesn't matter how good of a painter you are, the technique is solid. There we go. So here we are, we have this huge skin panel. My suggestion is just keep the same 6-inch roller. There's no real reason to set up another paint gear with a traditional roller. I know it seems like a lot of space, but invest a couple minutes rolling it. You'll end up with a nice product. You're gonna end up spending 10 or 15 minutes just cleaning up the other roller anyway. Okay, so all of our skins have got the primer on. It's all nice and dry, relatively speaking. It's been an hour, we just had lunch. So now I'm coming back with a sanding sponge, and I am not trying to scuff the surface. This particular product bonds amazing with the paint. What I am doing is just making sure that I don't have any large dust or dirt particles. And so I'm just doing a little bit of a circle here. The idea, just to make sure if there's any debris that's in my way, I can get rid of it. Ensure that I have a nice smooth surface to work with. Just a little tip when you're working with your paint, pour out enough that you'd only leave about an inch, inch and a half in the bottom of the can. That's perfect. Because now my brush, I can force it into there, clean off all the paint that's on the edges. And the only thing that's left is paint that's inside the brush, not on the outside. And that is how you cut without making a mess. And that is our color. I got paint on my hand. This is like a really sticky paint, man. Yeah, you don't want to get it all over yourself when you're working. All right. Well, the secret to rolling with a material like this, because it has the ability to cover such a huge amount of space with such a little amount of paint, is you really want to stretch your first roll mark out over a large area. Then you want to go back and then just push the paint around it, cover it up. Okay? And then as you're finishing, hopefully your roller is dry enough that it leaves a nice consistent texture. If it's not, go rub some paint off somewhere and then come back so that you have a nice consistent texture on the wall. There we go. There we go. Okay, so the second coat I like to do once the doors are back in place. Of course, I've got the insides and the outsides all painted, but because I'm moving this to a new location, I have no guarantee of the condition of the door when it arrives, and I would rather get the last coat while it's hanging in place, just in case there's any damage that needs to be repaired from transportation. I can deal with all that at the same time. Besides, this really doesn't take that long to throw a coat of paint on a door. And everywhere where you work, you're going to have different lighting, different environment. It's just nice to have it in this final resting place when you do the final coat. Okay. Sorry, now in order to finish the coat, I want to just put a little bit of paint on each of the inside of these doors. And I want to just back roll till the coverage is really nice. And again, I'm just using whatever pressure is necessary to get a nice even coat. And then I'm going to also put a little bit of texture on the doors where I rolled, or used the brush, sorry. There we go. Now, the only other thing that has to be done, of course, is putting the door hardware on. I'm going to wait till the next day to come back and do that, because I don't want to risk damaging the surface while I'm messing around with the hardware. If you're using a color that doesn't look like it's going to cover very well, you can actually add the color into your primer. So you can tint your primer, and then it gets the equivalent of 3 coats of coverage with your color so that you don't have any bleeding through. I didn't do that here because I'm using a relatively white color, and tinting white into a white primer isn't really effective. But if you're using something with a little bit more personality and you wanted to guarantee coverage, sometimes tinting the primer is a great way to go. I don't know how well the camera picks this up. Because we're dealing with a natural wood, there are some areas here where this joint is. You can see some light brown staining coming through. And generally speaking, that's just the sap from the oak. It's very here and there. Oh, there's a lot of it on this corner here. Wow, yeah, that really shows. You can see that? The reason you can see that is because when we are using our transition primer, it's a water-based product that bonds to oil. So it's not a sealer the same way that a stain blocker would work. So what you're going to find is when you're done, you want to give yourself about a week, maybe even 2. And then all these little spots are going to show up. And that's not a problem, because all you do is you get a stain sealer. And I like to use Aerosol Kills. It's a shellac-based product. It's the same product I use to seal all of the detail. Like you can see this was done in Kills, no dark yellow. Where the Kills didn't show up, the stain comes through. So we'll wait and find out where all the stains are that come through. And there might be just a few spots, it might be all over the place, it doesn't really matter. Once it's all made itself apparent, then we're going to come back, give it a stain block, a little touch up. Something like this. Because this product takes 30 days to cure, there's a possibility that over the next few weeks there's going to be a couple of nicks and scratches. Don't get worked up over it. It takes a while for paint to cure. So this is the kind of process, make it look like it's done in a hurry. But unless you're going to let these doors sit for a month and you're going to add spraying a blocker everywhere, this is what you're in for. So don't be alarmed. And if you have this kind of work done in your house and you see that there's stains coming through, it's very normal with solid wood. So don't get worked up over it. Just call your company up who did the work, inform them that they're going to have to do a service call. Book it a few weeks away so that all these different areas will show up, and then you'll get it all taken care of. And you can live happily ever after. Well, that's pretty much it. We're just finishing the last coat on the last couple of doors here. And we're going to be back in a couple of weeks. We'll tag this on the video. But we're going to come back and do the stain blocking. I know that's going to be an issue. I see some places already, even after 24 hours. There's bound to be a few more issues that'll poke up, heads up by then. So we'll just wait to deal with it all at the same time. And who knows? Maybe by then we might even have some other work to do. Okay, so it's been a couple of weeks since we put the cabinet doors in and got the paint job done. But since then, of course, the granite guys have come in. They've done a measuring and a reinstall of the countertops. Now these are beautiful quartz, and I'm here today because I need to reinstate all the plumbing. And we have a beautiful sunny day, which is the perfect time to do our touch-ups on our doors. When we did the install originally, it was a little overcast, kind of late winter. But now spring has sprung, and I am able to see all the minor imperfections. Little places where the grain of the wood has absorbed the paint more than the texture next to it. So I can see, you probably can't even see it on the camera, but I can tell I need to hit something here. I needed one more coat, right? Because there are highs and lows in the grains. There is a different material in the wood that the paint will react and respond to differently. And you'll get different levels of absorption. And you want your finish coat to be very consistent. And so in this kind of light, you just pass back and forth and you can see all the areas where you just need a little bit of a shot. Now we're really pleased because we didn't have any rubbage. There's been no damage in using the kitchen. So obviously our primer and paint technique has been very effective. But this is just a little quality control. One extra step that, generally speaking, nobody in the industry ever takes time for. And that's making sure that on a beautiful, bright, sunny day, it looks just as nice as it did when it was all cloudy out and we were relying on the lights of the room. But it is amazing how different things are in natural light. Okay, so here we go. It'll probably take 15 or 20 minutes. We'll just run around the room, have a good look, make sure that all of my spots I'm happy with. Nice. And of course, I can only look at it from one direction here. Okay, we'll also inspect inside the cabinets, looking for any of that staining. Not seeing any issues here at the moment. I've already contacted the client and asked if they've seen any discoloration, and there hasn't been any problem. Well, there we have it. That's the whole system for repainting the existing kitchen. This allows you to get a brand new look without the expense of changing all the doors. Now the thing is it takes a little bit of blood, sweat, and tears. Material cost for this project was less than $100, all right? A little bit of primer, a gallon of paint, and of course, we put the new stickies on the back of the door, the new bumpers, so everything is nice and soft. I'm really pleased with the way this turned out. It took probably about 2 hours to level off all the doors again. That can be a bit of a trick, okay? So expect to have some time to be patient there. But other than that, the process is simple. Prep, prime, paint, paint, paint. Put on the hardware and you're good to go. Brand new kitchen. So if you like this kind of content, give us a thumbs up. We appreciate the interaction. Questions, I'm sure you're gonna have questions, put them all below. I will answer those questions every single day and we'll help you get through your project too. So Formica tops, let's just talk countertops for a second, because a lot of homes are made with a Formica top kitchen. And there's a reason for it. The stuff is durable. It comes in a variety of different colors and textures and glazes, and you can get just about any look you want with Formica. And the price point is usually about $20 to $25 a linear foot of counter space. That's why it's used. But we're going to transform this because it seems like the new normal nowadays is to have some sort of natural stone. And that's a bit of an oxymoron because we're going back with quartz on this job, which is not natural at all. It's a man-made stone. And you need to understand that if you're using man-made stone in your kitchen, it's been made with a resin and it does not handle heat very well. So make sure you never put a hot pot on your quartz. That being said, let's show you how to remove this stuff. And it's really quite simple. Again, we're cutting silicone. It's amazing how much silicone is used in a house. All right, so for the most part, countertops are installed with gravity. But because Formica is installed on a particle board and it is not always flat, it is screwed down. But it's not screwed from the surface, it's screwed from underneath. So as long as you know where to look, usually 4 corners, a screw like this, and nothing in the back corner. Well, that was awfully nice of them. We have to just remove a couple of drawers here in order to get my drill in. We'll lean into the back. Here's a screw here. And one on the front. There we go. And that is all there is to it. We'll put the drawers back right away because we don't need to have access to anything when we put our cords back because it is so heavy. If we've done this right and they tiled this right, this countertop is now no longer attached to the cabinet, and there should be a small gap between the stone and the countertop that's been covered with silicone that we've cut. We should be able to just slide this right out. I'm going to move the stove just a little bit. Get a good grip here. Getting a little bit more silicone in the back here. Giving me a bit of a fight. I love a good fight. I usually end up with a black eye though. There we go. Ta-da! All right, there we go. Out with the old and in with the new. So this little piece of man-made love, probably about 100 pounds? Yep, maybe 120. Whew. Now, we're dealing with a lot of precision here. Not a lot of room for error. We'll get it up here first. Man, that is beautiful. Now what we're going to do is we're going to throw a couple of dabs of the sealant bond in the back corners, just so that it'll have something there to hold it in place. Not that it needs a whole lot of help. It's not going to jump off, but it may slide around. There we go. And then I'll just lift the front and throw a little squeeze in here too. You want to put that about 2 inches back, just so it doesn't end up squeezing out, gluing your door shut or something. There we go. And that is an installed countertop. Amazing how simple that is. So if you're updating your kitchen and you're changing your countertops, just remember that you have a few options. You've got, of course, your Formica, and there are luxury versions of Formica, so don't discount that. Because like I said, it's about $25 on the high side per linear foot of countertop. Where generally speaking, granite and quartz start at around the $50 to $60 range per square foot. You're also paying for all the waste and offcut, okay? So it's not as simple as just measuring out your counter. If you have any turns, they're going to be cutting that out of another piece of stone, and you're going to be buying all the stone that's used in the production process. So keep that in mind. You also have to deal with 2 things. The man-made stuff, the quartz, lovely to have for ease of maintenance. You don't have to use a sealer, and it doesn't take any maintenance. But what it does take is discipline. You can't get it hot. You can't put a hot pot on this because the resin will melt and it'll leave a mark. The natural stone, although it takes a sealer, it's just a surface sealer, usually applied every 2 or 3 years. It takes about 10 minutes, not a big deal, but you can put hot pots on granite and you'll never hurt that surface. The other thing is with granite, if you ever get a chip or a crack or any other kind of damage, you can call up your Granite Pro from Ottawa Granite Pro, and he can come out and he can do a surface repair on site while you wait, and you'll never even notice your damage ever again. The guy's amazing. Okay, so the reason we are covering stone countertops, granite, quartz, and otherwise as a DIY video, which is kind of strange because you can't do your own countertop in this material. The reason I'm covering this is because when you go to talk to your countertop company about this kind of material, there's a few things that they're not going to do for you. Number one, they're not going to remove your old countertops for you without charging an arm and a leg. Number two, they're not going to disengage your old plumbing and remove it out of the way at all. Most of these companies won't assume any liability dealing with the plumbing, so you're going to have to be in charge of your own plumbing. So you're going to have to know how to disconnect, turn the water supply off, remove your faucet, and then reinstate all the plumbing again when you're done. Okay, so just a couple of quick points I wanted to bring your attention because these are older videos and things are always changing. So when you're doing your cabinet repainting, I'm going to recommend a different product as a primer so you don't run into any issues whatsoever. And this is new on the market. It's an odorless Zinsser. That is basically a shellac paint, and it will prime the surface with a light sanding, and it won't have any bleed through, okay? So you only have to do it once. Now, the new odorless product is what makes this possible inside your house. Let's face it, homeowners, in a lot of cases, you can't do all your painting outside. And if you're going to be painting inside, the traditional shellac would absolutely get straight to your head, and you would be unsafe to drive for days. So the new odorless product is very low VOC. It performs just as well, and you can do it in the comfort of your own home without going crazy. So I would recommend that now, and then just finish off with your paint. If you can, grab a Wagner power sprayer if you can't get a hold of the melamine paint. In that video, the melamine paint is an incredible product. It's technology that we're relying on, and it melts into the surface, even on a vertical surface, so you don't get roller lines and brush lines. A lot of comments on that video, but the reality is if you're not using that paint, then get a sprayer so you get a better finish, okay? Now, as far as the countertops are concerned, industry standard is moving towards the laser measurement. Counter companies will come out and take measurements themselves, so you're completely off the hook. But still, there are guys doing old school. They might want to measure the center line of where the sink cabinet is. And if you give them that information, in a lot of cases, they'll also sell a kitchen sink to you. It's part of their business. They've got the template. It makes it standard, and it's easy for them to put the hole in the right spot. All you got to do is have the decision made ahead of time. It's going to be 1 or 3 holes for your faucet. So do all your shopping in advance. Have that information ready. And when you go to the stone place, make sure if you have a smaller kitchen, you ask them, I want to take a look at your offcuts. They're going to have a whole wall of offcuts. Offcuts is anything that's not a full slab. And when they're dealing with quartz and granite, the first person to buy some of that stone pays a premium price. And all the offcuts are a lot cheaper. Don't let them lie to you. They'll give it to you away almost cheap. We got those counters for $1,500, all right? That's 3 pieces of stone with a miter joint and a hole for the sink drilled, delivered on site. It was a great deal. And if you keep up with the odorless Zinsser and 1 gallon of finish paint, it's not even going to be $300 for all of the painting cabinets. So now your price is really affordable. Right away, you start to see this transition. Now let's jump in. I think the next project is going to be the backsplash. Again, the primer that you're going to see in there, and then the cement and the grout and the trims. You can do the whole backsplash for $500, all right? We are almost having a complete finished kitchen. Let's jump back in the video and we'll see what else we can come up with. So traditionally, with doing a backsplash in the kitchen, if you have existing tile, you've got 2 options. A lot of these things, they're just put on with an adhesive. But you know what? When they're building new houses, they do the adhesive before they even use a primer. That's right. They're right over top of drywall, which means this tile is attached to the paper backing of the drywall. And when you try to rip that off, you're ripping your wall apart. So what most guys in the renovation business have learned is if we just smash it out and cut the drywall top and bottom and replace that whole piece of wall section, and then put on a backsplash, it's actually quicker and easier. But I'll tell you, that is a really huge waste of time. So for a DIY trick, I've got a way to do a tile over the tile. I know, you're gonna love it. So what we gotta do is just remove all of the electrical stuff, of course. Almost everything electrical is attached with a number 632 screw. It's a machine screw, and that means a number 1 Robertson drill bit. Take these bad boys out because these are gonna be garbage. We're going to have to use longer screws when we come back. Now, if you don't feel comfortable playing around with live power, turn it off. Just go downstairs. Most new homes, the breaker panels are all labeled for kitchen. If not, well, you can always apply some black tape just to make it a little bit safer. I like to live on the wild side. All right, so when I'm doing my backsplash, my simple process is garbage bags, believe it or not. When you have nice countertops, you want to do something to protect them while you're working. Tarps are no good to you because they're just always sliding off. Garbage bags almost have like this cling effect. It's almost like using saran wrap. And it almost tapes in place. Look at that. How cool is that, eh? Now, a lot of people think that if you're going to go tile over tile, what you need to do is come over here with some sort of a machine and sand the ceramic tile down. And honestly, that may have been true a long time ago, but nowadays in the renovation business, we're relying on technology, not technique, okay? So, boom. You've seen this before if you watch our channel. This is Eco Prime Grip. We use this as a floor leveler primer. I can convert sheet vinyl flooring into a substrate that I can tile over on concrete with this primer. I can also use it on existing tile to install tile right over top with a cement. And all I gotta do is bust my way in here. Boy, that is not as easy as you think sometimes. I wish there was an easier way to get this done. If anybody knows how to open this easy, put it in the comment section below. Yeah. To the guys at Mapway, maybe you could put in a spigot here, so like a spout, we could actually pour it out like a paint can. That'd be real helpful. All right. Dear Lord. We're just gonna load that up. Stuff's a little drippy, but who cares? We're on plastic. Get yourself a little mini roller. And this is a lot like painting, for Pete's sake. Just do a cut and roll job on this, okay? There we go. And we're just putting this on the surface of the... And this doesn't look like much, but I'll tell you, when this primer is dry, it is like a rubber surface with grit. It is absolutely amazing. And as long as you don't let this stuff freeze in the wintertime, a pail of this will last you a long, long, long time for a lot of projects. And I love using the mini roller. It just goes in every nook and cranny without any difficulty. And then when I'm done, I don't have to wash. I just throw the darn thing out. Now remember, this is a dry area, not a wet area. And according to the tile recommendations of the International Brotherhood of Guys Who Like to Tile, then we need to get about an 80 to 85% adhesion. So if you don't get every square inch of this stuff on here, don't worry about it. Backsplashes don't get a lot of abuse. Now this stuff dries in about an hour. So do your primer, clean up, walk away, and then you can pull out all your tools and get set up for doing your backsplash. By the time you're all said and done, this should be dry and ready to go. I'm loving this product because it makes life quick and simple. If I was to do a demolition approach here and then a reinstall, it would probably take me better part of half a day just to be at the same place as I'm gonna be in here in about 15 minutes. Okay, so here we go. Just about done. We are gonna go grab a coffee while this stuff dries, and when we come back, we'll show you how to install, and this is beautiful. This is a subway tile we're gonna use. It's like a 2x12, I believe. It's a ceramic, it's very simple. It's gonna have a little bit of depth of color in the gray scheme, so it'll really nicely tie everything together. I'm so excited about this. Ceramic tile, $3 a square foot for backsplash. That's the way to go. So this is the stone that we picked out. This is a ceramic tile, it's 2x10. It's very simple, it's got a beveled edge, which is nice. So you get the little bit of texture on the wall with a nice cleaning surface, easy to wash. And what I've done is I've laid this out just to measure it off, okay? So whenever you're doing tile, you really wanna think about the layout before you get started. It's not an afterthought. And what you do is you wanna measure off your gap. Countertop to cabinet. 16 1/4. I've already gone and checked. The entire room is within 1/8 of an inch of that. So what I really want to do is I want to create an environment where I'm installing this stone at 16 inches. Okay? Now you have an option because we're going to be using these grouge spacers. You can go with a 16 or a 32nd inch or even a 3/16. Okay, so you can have the ability to manipulate a little bit. And generally speaking, backsplash tile are all designed to fit that gap of an 18-inch gap between upper and lower cabinets before countertop. So as long as your countertop is standard, and in our case it's quartz, it's 1.25 inch, we're in good shape. So this is really easy to work out. So now I've measured off 16-inch using a 1/8 inch spacer. So I know that I'm gonna go full tile from counter to cabinet all the way along my backsplash. And I'm not gonna have any ugly cuts near the top. And I'm not gonna have a big gap to fill with nothing but grout later. So very important when you're planning, know the dimension before you go and buy your stone. Just in case it's a little odd, you wanna be able to pick something out that's not gonna have slivers or huge gaps left. Other than that, the only thing left to do before prepping is move the hood fan. What I did is I took out the screens, just backed off the 4 screws a little bit, slid the whole thing forward and tightened it up again. There is a gap between the hood fan and the cabinet on both sides, and so we want to make sure that we get tile up in and behind that, and then we can reinstall this hood fan, pushing it back to the wall. Piece of cake. This one actually vents up into the air. If your hood fan is vented out the back wall, I would suggest leaving it in place and tiling around it, just because the flange that fits into the wall is only, I think, is about 3/4 of an inch thick. So if you start tiling over tile and you have a rear exit fan, you're gonna run into problems, so be careful of that. Other than that, let's just talk about the tools that we're gonna need. All right, so our tools are very simple. And I love this because I'd love to be able to show a very simple combination of tools for doing work at home. Here's my little tile cutter. It's a Brutus cutter. It's designed for 12-inch stone, great for backsplash. I'm gonna need a drill with a #1 Robertson bit. All of these electrical switches and plugs need to be backed out and pulled away from the wall. Just some tape, a marker, knife, float, and a trowel, and my spacers. And of course, a measuring tape. And you are in business. So with the basic tools, you can be able to do stonework yourself. The only thing that's missing here is our grinder. It's set up outside. We're gonna cut all of our stone with the grinder outside, just so we don't put that dust in our atmosphere here. All right, so when you're doing a backsplash tile, you don't need a whole lot of tool, just a small pail. You can use your grout mixing blade here, all right? That'll work fine. We're just gonna make a 1/2 pail of cement. And the reason I like mixing it in this is because I can have it sitting on my counter and it's really simple to work from. I'm not using a lot of cement in the application, so there's no sense having a big pail up there since it's too hard to work with. We're using the ultralight cement from Mapai. And the reason we're using this instead of an adhesive is because of our primer. It'll bond much better to a cement than it will an adhesive or a glue. So here we go, tricks for the trade. Always put your cement into the water, not the other way around. And in this product case, a little bit of water goes a long way. Don't need a whole lot of drill for this either. Just on low speed. Okay, now, let's show this. For most people, they would look at that and go, oh, that's a good cement for working with tile, right? It's a little bit stiff, blah, blah, blah. But the point is ultralight mixes different than any other cement you've ever worked with. That is missing almost a 1/2 gallon of water. Ultralight should be more of a consistency like whipped cream, not like a cement. Here we go. Now that is more what I'm looking for. And I'll show you this. The way you test it is you can just go like this and see if it holds the peak. Okay? That's amazing. It's so light. It's like fluff. It's almost like a marshmallow kind of a soup mix. It's crazy. But that is how you properly mix this product. As long as it's holding the peak. You want it as wet as you can get as long as it holds the peak. When you're mixing, if it's not holding its peak, just put a little more powder in right away. but you have to make sure you have this compound the way you want it before you let it sit. Once your 10 minutes of setting time is up, you can't touch it again. You're gonna just destroy your product. All right, so we're gonna let this sit here for 10 minutes. You read the instructions on the bag. Almost every cement that you mix, you wanna have a setup time. So we're gonna leave this and go grab ourselves a coffee. All right, time for a quick recap. Now our cement has been sitting for 10 minutes, it's ready to go. We have everything primed, we've got our counters covered with my plastic. This is what I love to do just so I'm not cleaning up a mess later. And I'm not getting hairline scratches from any of my tools. Especially with quartz. You gotta be real careful actually, because a lot of the housing on your tools, it's all made with like an aluminum product. And whenever there's a vibration with aluminum, it actually will wear off onto the quartz and leaves a mark. Now, there's a cleaning trick for that. Just take Clorox bleach and a little unsanded grout, and you can rub those marks out, but why make a mess that you have to clean up later? So, what we have to do now is just remove all of our electrical. And I don't know about you, where you're from, but around here, whoop, these are 632 screws. I generally am a crazy man, and I do all this with live power, but if you want to turn off the breakers, it's not a bad idea. Now, depending on the scenario, your screws may not be long enough to reinstall. These look like about 1.5 inches, so we're gonna work fine. So we wanna keep these handy because that is going to work just fine. And then, of course, the last thing you have to do, since we're starting in an inside corner and we have 6 rows of tile, which we've already predetermined, we have to take 3 of them and cut them in half because we're doing a half offset subway tile pattern. Okay, so our tile is 10 inch, but it is an actual 9 3/4. So the way you find out the measurement to the mid part is half of 9 is 4.5, and half of 3/4 is 3/8. So when you put all that together, it gives me 4 7/8. Boom, right there. All right, so there's my mark. Now, I don't know if you've noticed, but on my tile cutter, I actually have a mark here where my tile cuts. So I can put my tile on here, put my mark in line, and then I like to do this. I only have to measure once. So I put every tile on that same spot. And in case you're just off by a hair, keep your left and right side separate. Just a little scratch and a little pressure, and off we go to the races. It's that simple. No need to have a $1,000 machine to do that. It's really all the science is in the little cutting wheel, and you can buy a replacement wheel for $8. So a $30 tile cutter will do the job. By the way, a lot of cases, these handles, they have a screw-off end with a spare wheel. So if you buy a $30 cutter, they already give you a free $8 wheel. But if you don't know about it, you don't know about it. And you can see how good the cement is, right? That's got grab. This is why I love to use this, because I'm going to be taking this tile straight across the back of the stove area, and this stuff will keep my tile from slipping. So I don't have to put any temporary bracing in place. It's so much easier to just buy a good product than to have to fuss around with a piece of wood and screwing it to the wall and finding the studs and maybe putting a screw through your electrical. Save yourself the hassle. Spend the extra $5 and get the right cement. All right. So you can see the technique is simple. You just throw a few blobs on the wall. It's not going anywhere because this is really good cement for this situation. Because you're going to want to be able to take your time working around all your electrical plugs, right, without getting yourself electrocuted. You can't do that if you got really wet, nasty, cheap cement. Here we go. And if you're using adhesive, you can't do a large area with backsplash because it dries before you even get the tile on. That's why this cement is so wonderful, because it holds everything right to the wall, and it gives you about a 15 to 20 minute working time, which is lots of time to fuss around here with the cement and get your stone cut and installed. You don't want to do the entire kitchen at once here. You want to just do a certain area. And we know that the full tile to the top, so I'm going to have no problem laying in the tile all across this area. right out of the gate, from bottom to top. Now, I'm going to show you this technique. It's very important. When you're putting tile in your kitchen, lift it up and put your first spacer on your counter. Oh, so important, especially if you live in a zone, a region where you get probably below freezing temperatures. What ends up happening to the house is on the outside walls, the lumber of your house freezes and starts to warp outwards, okay? As the wood, moisture in the wood starts to freeze, it expands. And so a lot of times you'll see in your kitchen, the silicone lines around your kitchen on the outside walls gets cracked and the wall separates from the cabinets in the wintertime. So if you put the space here, in the wintertime, if you use the right kind of elastomeric caulking, which can grow 400% of what you put on, which is 4 times the size, you won't get cracking. But if you start with your tile right on the counter, you're going to have a nasty mess come the winter. Now, if you don't live in that kind of an area, I imagine you might get away with it, but most areas have heating and cooling just because of the air conditioning systems that we use if you live in the heat. So it's nice to have that kind of control. There we go. Next up, I'm going to put the half tile. Now I like to, when I'm doing this stuff, just lay it in and then move it all around. This keeps the cement from getting stuck and squeezing out the gaps. It's a little painstaking like this. Now if you do a lot of tile with this particular product, you can just come along and set it in place, eyeball it, and give it a press. Generally leave it because this cement will hold it in place. But for most people, it's better just to take the time and use the spacers. We're not in a rush because the cement, like I said, takes a while to dry. This is where it gets fun. So you have to kind of eyeball. You want to get nice and down here and see what your height is. There's 3 things you need to know. The left and the right side of the box, okay, mark those. The center of the box, and then where the hole is that this screw mounts to. Most boxes are a rectangle with an added little bump circle on it, half circle with a screw mount in it. And so the box looks like this, and then it has this thing going on, right? Well, you don't want to grind all that. That'd be ridiculous, okay? So what you want to do is you want to cut this rectangle, and then take your grinder and just go zip, 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 so that you've got defined space there for your screw hole. And that's all there is to it. Now, I'm going to run outside and grind this real quick, and then we'll come back in and we should be able to finish most of this rest of this wall for the first 4 or 5 feet. I think I'm going to need a little bit of a grind on that piece right there, but that'll be about it for the grinder. Other than that, we'll just do a few scratch tools and we'll be done. There we go. And double check, make sure that you can see the hole, and maybe just clean the cement out of the way, just so that when it's time to put that fixture back, you're not going to be in there with a tool chiseling around. All right, and I'm going to suggest you measure this way, especially if you leave the power on like me. Don't get your measuring tape out because that's got a metal end and you don't want to blow it up. Okay, you can touch the plug with the ceramic, it's not conductive, so get right up to the edge there. So when you're putting these tiles in, I'll demonstrate here. You want to set it right on the tile, or right on the tile. That's how you want to start. and then you want to slide it up and away and into position. That's how you'll guarantee you'll never get the cement in the grout lines. Okay, so once again, tile to tile, and then you slide it up and away. Okay, that folds the line down, gives you much better contact, but it also keeps all the grout lines nice and clean. So you're not coming back afterwards and doing a whole lot of cleaning. This is the process for tiling over existing tile. You know, if you're not using, if there's no existing tile, then you don't have to use the cement. Okay, it's completely optional. In a kitchen, tiling on a bare wall is usually done with an adhesive. That would probably be a much more traditional installation. The benefit of tiling over tile is really obvious. Generally speaking, if you're going to remove a backsplash, you have to take the tile off the drywall surface and the drywall gets destroyed. It's really difficult in a lot of cases to remove just the tile. So what most guys do is they'll come in here and they'll quote, or they'll remove and cut out all the stone and they'll cut out all the drywall, replace all the drywall. It just creates a whole lot of work. It's about, I would say, almost half a day just to remove and reinstall the wallboard, and then you've got to do the backsplash, and then you've got to grout. It becomes a whole weekend project. Doing it this way, you can do it in an afternoon. And that is a renovation on Saturday and fishing on Sunday. Real quick, before you come back to the plug, just mark the center line and put that on the grout line here. And that's how you can continue on with your perfect space. Remember, 4 7/8 was our magic number here. There we go, we just set up the laser line. Now I've got that perfect, right? No concern if I'm gonna be good or not. And there we go. We'll cut this. Now, one of the benefits of tiling in this environment, without tearing everything apart, is you don't risk damaging your cabinets. Remember, these are solid wood cabinets. So if we were to start pulling out a hammer and a chisel, you're gonna cause damage. This way, you guarantee that everything stays mint condition. Especially if you're doing this as part of the process, like we did here, because we painted all these cabinets, and they're only 2 weeks old, the paint, so it isn't even finished curing yet. I can't even imagine trying to work around that curing paint until at least 30 days. It'd just be a nightmare. Well, here we are. I think I'm about, what, 30 minutes in, maybe? I think since I started. It's going to take me another hour and a half to finish this off. That's, and I've done a lot of this, so, you know, you might expect to take twice as long. But, you know, we're going to get so many comments on this from contractors out there who are hating on this video, because it's like, how dare you show them how easy it is? How dare you show them a system that doesn't force them to remove all the walls and help me jack up the bill? But reality is, folks, if you've got a skinny little tile like this, you're not losing any counter space. You know, what's a 1/4 of an inch? For me, you know, a couple $100 for the backsplash tile, 1 bag of cement, bag of grout. I mean, it's a $300 transformation of the room, okay? It is absolutely spectacular. And the fact that you can do it yourself with a couple of hand tools, I say contractors should just get out of the backsplash business. Okay, so I'm going to show you a technique for working around your faucet. I don't want to be sitting here with this metal trowel messing around trying to just back butter the tile right in your hand. Okay, this is not all that tricky. We don't need 100% adhesion here. All right, we're not holding up the house. It's just a little something pretty to put on the wall that's easy to clean. All right, so set tile to tile, set it in, and then slide it into place. Nice and easy. And then for over here, I have a little bit of the cement there, so I'm just going to leave that part of the tile untouched. Okay. And then slide it into place. Come back with the spacers in a minute. Okay, so now that the tile is all installed, I've screwed the plugs back in just to guarantee that the holes are going to be good. Okay, I don't unscrew them tight because you're going to cause problems with breakage and pulling them out of position. But I just wanted to guarantee that all my screw holes are good. Now we're going to let it set up for a little while before we grout. And while we're waiting for that, before we grout, we want to take care of this exposed edge. Now, because we're tile over tile, you have to be a little bit creative here. So what I've done is I've used my understanding of building materials available at the building store. We bought some outside angle. And this is aluminum, but it's a brush metal and it matches up with all the brush metals in the room. So what we did was just put a little miter joint on it. We're going to cap it, and this is going to be the finished look. And that is going to look absolutely stunning. We can use a painter's caulking up against the wall. And the reason I pulled this out now is because you want to put this on with your hot glue gun before you grout. Okay? Very important. If you grout first, you're going to find that there's always going to be a film or a residue left on the tile. And it takes it till you dry overnight, and then you got to buff it off. And that adds a whole lot of process to this. Or if you put this on now before you grout, then you're going to be working with a brand new clean surface without any dust. And that's how I prefer to use it. A little dab goes a long way. Hot glue is one of these particular products where you don't want to make the glue sit too long before it's pressed into place. So do one piece with the glue, get it installed, and then just measure it off and then let it sit for a second until it cools down. There, that's done. Now what I'm going to do is I'm going to put the glue right on the same spot. I'm building this out a little bit because I'm gluing onto the bevel. And that is the problem that I'm running into here. Because I'm gluing onto the bevel, the top piece wanted to roll back a little bit. So now I'm going to glue to glue and build out my bevel that way. I'll just hold that in place until it's dried. Okay, all good. Now, when you're using hot glue, if you see any of this glue sitting out, proud of the trim, just take your knife, trim it back. It will not grout nice and it'll be ugly. So trim it off. Now we are free and clear. And all the little glue residue, just rub your hand on the countertop. It all just wipes right off, folks. We're free and clear. Now when this is all set up, about an hour or two, we're gonna let it dry. We'll pull out all our spacers and then we're gonna grout with all that in place, and we'll add some caulking on the top, paint it in. That'll be spectacular. All right, well, thanks for joining us on our little how to tile over tile episode here. It's a great little how-to trick to spruce up your home without making a huge mess in an afternoon. If you like this kind of content, I really would ask you to give us a thumbs up and ask questions in the comments below. Of course, we're going to answer those questions for you. And if you haven't subscribed to our channel, by all means, hit the subscribe button. We do have new videos coming out every single week for your enjoyment and education. And if you want to know how this turned out, as far as the whole look when it's finished grouting, just check us out on our Reality Renovation series. There will be a link at the end of this video, and you can check out that and all of our other major projects that we have filmed. All right, so we have two more videos here we're going to show you. One is for, and it's not from this particular kitchen. We didn't film every aspect of it back in the early days. Max and I weren't working full time, so it wasn't always convenient. We have a video of an installation of an undermount sink, which is generally what you're going to use if you're going with a stone countertop. Now, it was from a bathroom, but the process is exactly the same. The only note is I do support you put in a shelf rod as a support for that sink, because in kitchens, people tend to put a lot of weight, dishes and water and pots, and so make sure you get extra support in there. You don't want to rely completely on silicone seal. We're also going to show you a floor installation video, because if you're changing your kitchen, you've got to change your floor. It just doesn't have the same effect. Now, you can put in a laminate product or a vinyl product. It doesn't really matter. We did do a video. We're going to show you that as well. But understand today's recommendation is to add a sound underpad under either of those floors, okay? Because it absorbs all that hitting and walking noise, and it really increases the quality of the production. So, regardless of anybody else's recommendations, I say you always use an underpad. End of discussion. Jump into these videos, and we're talking dollars and cents here, right? So the sink is going to be about $100, and the taps will be a couple $100. The floor, you can get a good quality floor for $500 to $600 for that kind of a space of a 10 by 12 kitchen. It gets you all put together just around $3,000 mark, but I'm in Canada. So if you're watching this from the States, it's actually a lot cheaper than that. Anyway, jump into that, and we'll see you on the other side of the demonstration. Today we're going to tackle the how to install the undermount sink. So really simple. We have a cultured marble top, and we have got a porcelain undermount sink here. This one is made in Germany. That's nice. It has a built-in overflow, so there's really nothing to be concerned about here. You just need to know which way to install it. So when you have a nice deep well like that on one side and shallow on the other, always install the shallow part towards you. That way it facilitates washing your hands. Most faucets drain the water right in the back of the sink. So all you need to do, step one, there's a couple of quick measurements that you need to do. Measure the depth of your cabinet to the underside of the countertop. In this case, it's a little bit more than 16 1/4. So because we're going to use shims for installing, we'll just go with 16 1/4. Nice and easy. This is 7 3/4. There we go. So we do the math. I'm just going to take myself an 8-inch piece of wood. I cut in advance just to save us some time. And the idea here is simple. I hold the sink in place. I apply my adhesive, which is a silicone. Now this is a New Flex brand silicone. It smells like vinegar. When it smells like vinegar, you know it's going to work really well. That's an important key. So then basically you put the silicone on, you pull the sink up by the drain into position, and you just wedge the piece of wood underneath. And then you use the shims to make it nice and firm, and then tap it with the hammer, and that'll force the sink up nice and level all the way around under compression. So in a perfect world, that works really easy. So let's get our sink in place here. Okay, so we're just going to apply our silicone really, not too liberally, about a 1/4 inch bead all the way around. You want enough that it bonds, but not so much that you're wiping out all the silicone for an hour and getting it all over yourself. Like I said, this is the good stuff, and if you get it on your clothes, you're not getting it out. You just want to be careful to make sure that your bead is nice and continuous, because it's not just an adhesive, it is also a sealer. Make sure that water's not going to get in the cabinet. And the secret to this, keeping clean, have toilet paper handy. All right, so now I'm going to grab this, lift it into position. My block of wood there. Oh, come on, baby. Here we go. Agree. There we go. Now when that starts to make good contact, there we go. Yep, I'm just jamming them in there, manipulating the front and the back side of the hole to tilt it and squeeze it in place. Okay, so now it's not going to fall out. So now that you get up here, you can kind of manipulate this into place. So you don't want to have any of the corners sticking out. Make sure that the gaps are consistent all the way around. Okay. We're going to take a minute here. Wipe off the extra. Really, one wipe, discard. Don't try to be cheap with this because you'll end up getting it all over yourself. So basically it's installed now. It's siliconed in, it's in the right position. We've got the brace and some shims, but we want to add more compression. So this is the point where we get a little bit tricky with this. I'm going to add one more shim in here. Just a little bit of a hammer. Oh yeah, that lifted it right into position real good. Well, this is awesome having all this light with Max here today. I've never seen under a sink like this in my life. The bottom of this medicine cabinet actually isn't very strong. It's only about a 1/4 inch piece of plywood. And so this is a bit of a tricky scenario. The only other way that you could do this is you can do it from on top. You can put a piece of 2x4 across with a hole drilled here. And you can buy at the store a threaded rod, about a 1/2 inch, and you can get galvanized bolts for the 1/2 inch rod. And then what you do is you put a little piece of wood underneath with a hole in it as well. You slide it over the rod, you tighten the nut on, and then from the top you lift the sink into place, and you can thread the rod and use a wrench to put the compression. That's another way to do it. This is just really quick and simple. So now the next step, now that we have our sink in place, we're going to attach our faucet, our drain, all that kind of stuff. This particular sink doesn't need a gasket. It is just too heavy and too flat, and it doesn't have a cavity for the gasket to sit in. So if you want to seal around this, the only thing you can use is a little bit of cured clear silicone. Let's go. When you're tightening this up, you don't want to go as, full tight right away. Especially if you're working alone. If you have someone working with you, like a cameraman, you could reach over and hold it in position while you tighten it. Otherwise, finger tighten so it still has a little bit of flexibility. We want to lift it forward away from the back wall, and that'll be nice.
You want me to hold it?
No, I'm good. There we go. Just take your pliers. What I want to do is just separate them a little bit. There's tabs on that you can turn with, but if you have a little bit of torque with a pair of pliers, you can really get it tight. So you don't ever want this coming loose once you got the rest of your plumbing put together. Always want to test to make sure you got it on there tight enough. Okay. Yeah, those tabs aren't going to move. Yep, so this particular faucet, it has a threaded assembly and it has a gasket ring inside here. So we're just going to seat this in and push down on this part. Now the gasket assembly is inside, nice and strong there. We're going to just make sure we're not cross-threaded. We're going to tighten this collar on here, and that'll hold it all in place. Doesn't matter how tight you turn this, it won't affect the ability for the faucet to move, so feel free to make sure it's nice and snug. One more thing, since we're out in the country and we have well water here, it's a little hard. And you saw the cottage plumbing. I'm concerned about debris. I'm going to take my knife here and I'm going to take off this extra bit of screen. How many screens does a tap need? Now that the screens are gone, we won't have a problem with the faucet bunging up. You won't have as much aeration, but I'd rather have a faucet that works. So here we are with our sink components. We've got our basket strainers. We have to take off our nut. We have a nice little gasket here. I call it the top hat gasket. Just so I can differentiate between that and a regular O-ring. Now, I am not a licensed plumber. I've just installed a bazillion of these things, so. Okay, and then we just go back where we just were and put all that back together again. So the assembly is simple. You take your ring, you put your brass extension in there, and then you drop in your washer. No pastes, glues otherwise necessary. So once we've locked these in place, we'll be good. Now this is 1.5 inch pipe, and this is an 1.5 inch hole. In the kitchen, your drains are always 1.5 inch hole. The exact same piece, they make it for bathroom sinks, and it's 1.25 inch. Do not get the wrong one. That's a drive back to the store you're going to regret. Slide that on. So it's important that once you have everything finger tight, take the wrench, and you really want to tighten the basket nut here. If it's moving around, just put your hand in the top. Put a little bit of compression resistance there. There we go. Alright, this will get us our measurements. We just adjust these. What we're looking to measure, we measure from the inside to where you want the pipe to finish. We're looking at a 9.5 inch pipe. That's comfortable. All right, so we're gonna go and cut that first. We're gonna cut a 1-inch piece for here so we can stick these together and send our water back towards the back corner. In this particular application, there is no P-trap. It's actually in the basement downstairs, which is great because it gives you a little extra storage. You can keep your garbage and recycling under the sink that way. I'm a little old school. Love to sand up my ends a little bit, get rid of my burrs, rough up my fittings. I just like to believe that that might just make things stick a little bit better. I happen to be aware that there's 2 kinds of ABS out there. And one in the building store that I was at today to pick these fittings up doesn't carry the kind that I like to use. My plumbing supply store is closed and it's a Saturday, so I got stuck using this stuff. And I know that if you don't rough it up, it just does not hold very well. Then time to grab the glue. Using the yellow ABS glue here, I'm going to grab a cloth. This stuff can make a mess, so respect people's property and their cabinets. What we're going to do, actually, is just glue these in first. Get these prepped up. Loosen the collar. Slide that into position. Slide that one into position. And this is really how simple this is. Run your glue and then turn these in together. Tighten the collars. Leave a bit of a slope. Hand tight, and then a 1/4. And that's it. So what I'm going to do here is I'm going to put a little bit of glue here, get this connection piece in, then I'm going to just kind of dry fit my corner, and I'm going to measure. And you can see I have to cut the back pipe. So 10 inches to here. 10 inches to the bottom of this. So I need a one-handed tool so I can hold the pipe so something can cut it. Perfect. The secret when you're plumbing is your last connection. How do you get that pipe in? I always think you want to finish somewhere where you can glue this way and then go like that and then shove it in. So just pay attention to your process. So your last joint's an easy one. And then it'll go together really simple like that. So this is a braided supply line with a 3/8 female connector. It has a gasket inside. So once again, you know, we just got to line it up, find that happy place with the thread, finger tighten it. Now you know you've made it to the gasket. Up, there we go. And take your pliers, set that on there, about a 1/2 turn. You can over tighten those. So this is a lot of tool and a lot of torque. You can keep going until you can't go anymore. The danger of that is if you ever have to take it off and then reattach it again, the gasket will be shot and you'll have to buy a brand new supply line. So just another 1/2, and if you get a little drip developed, another little 1/4 turn, that's all you're gonna need. Try to extend the life of your lines. So the last thing we have to do is just silicone the seal around the sink. Because of the nature of the way this is designed, there's no room for a gasket underneath. So we're going to just take our New Flex 302. Love this product. It smells a lot like vinegar, but the reality is it works. Today we're talking click laminate flooring. We're going to teach you all the tips and tricks and secrets so you can have a quick, clean, fast, professional result that'll last a long time. So before we talk about our product today, let me just encourage you real quick, if you haven't subscribed to the channel, we got a lot of great information on here to help folks out just like you. So today is click laminate flooring, and the reason we're doing this video, because we've done a laminate floor installation, is I think this is the most popular DIY product on the market. There's a lot of people who can install this with minimal amount of tools, experience, and understanding. So we're gonna go through the benefits of why this is such a good product. First of all, it's easy to install. This product just fits into the grooves. The ends drop lock on top of the other piece beside it. And as a result, as long as you stagger your joints properly, you're gonna get a nice tight fit without any corners sticking up. And you can do it yourself at about half the time as the kind of floor where you gotta hit the boards and lock them together. Okay, so this is a great DIY project. You can do the average bedroom in about 3 or 4 hours if you have a helper with you. Okay, it'll probably take the whole day to install the whole floor, cut your doors, install your trims, but it's a one day, you got a brand new room. So this is why this project is popular. Now this particular floor is a 12mm floor, so it is a decent quality. It comes with the underpad already attached to the back, and that takes a whole step out of the project. So before we get started on the flooring, let's talk preparation. Okay, so preparation for doing a new flooring job, of course, is you have to get your existing subfloor in the condition where you're ready to put your new flooring down. That means it has to be tight. You don't want it moving around. This is really old flooring. This is 1.5 inch soft lumber, and it's nailed through the tongue and groove into the joists, which are on 16 inch on center. You can see where all the joints are for the flooring. That helps to identify where the boards are underneath. And the simplest way to do this really is you just go around walking and have somebody observe if the boards are moving. And if they're moving, then what you want to do is line up on the joist line and just drive some surface screws down in there and tighten it all up, okay? Once you've gone through and got your floor nice and tight, keep your drill and screws handy in case you find something along the way, but that's about all you need to do to prep your floor. If you have existing flooring in the room, then I always suggest before you put laminate floor down, remove the old flooring, because you don't have the ability to inspect your subfloor. And that's important. If you have holes or you have squeaky points or you have things that are moving around, you want to get that dealt with early, because once you put your new laminate floor on, if it's moving around too much, you're going to break the joints and it's not going to last very long. The other thing you want to do before you get started is make sure you sweep and vacuum your room. When you have tongue and groove joints like this that are over 100-year-old, you want to actually vacuum out each one of these gaps, because we're going to create an area here where as you step on a floating floor, there will be some air movement underneath the floor, and that'll encourage dirt to blow around. So if you can get it all now, you won't get crunching later. And yes, you just remember, your laminate floor can go on concrete. Just make sure you use a vapor barrier as a part of your underpad, and you can always talk to your floor supplier about getting that product. Okay, so let's just talk about laminate product itself real quick. It comes in a variety of different thicknesses that are available and a variety of widths. I like to have about a 4-inch board. I find the bigger ones in a lot of floors, there's just too much movement and it can't follow the contour enough without having hollow spots underneath. So that's my own personal preference. This particular floor has got like a hand scrape texture. Some of them have a wood grain texture. Some of them have no texture at all. There's shiny, there's flat, there's a variety of differences. Some of this product is even good for wet areas, so make sure if you're doing it in a bathroom or a laundry area, check the product, make sure it's made for that area. The reason I like laminate instead of vinyl is really it comes down to cost. This is the most cost-effective flooring on the market. If you're looking for a quick solution to brighten up a room or to clean up a space, this is the way to go if you have any kind of budget at all. This product I actually got a bit of a deal on. It was end of inventory. It was $1.69 a square foot, and it has the underpad already attached, so I have nothing else that I need on this project. And the way it installs is just boom. Drop it together and it sits snug together. It has a tongue and it has a groove, and the boards will continue to install in like fashion. You just line it up, okay, and snap it together. Done. That's the installation procedure. So you just do that a few hundred times and the room is finished, right? So what we're going to do now is we'll show you how to lay it out, because I get questions like this a lot. Which direction should I go? Do I go on the long wall, the short wall? Do I start at the door or the other side of the room? And the answer is simple. I prefer to start on the longest wall that you can start on, because the grain of this long board on a long wall aesthetically is pleasing. Now in this situation, the room is a little bit more square, so we're going to go in the same direction as the existing boards are now, and that'll help it to follow the contour of this old house that's here as well. It also gives us the ability to come to the entrance door in a situation where my door is going to be here and these boards will finish up into that space. That's a lot easier way to finish at a door. If you come this way, then your cut has got to be exactly perfect, cutting into the jamb and around the baseboard. It's quite intricate, but if you come at it this way into your door, you'll find that you only have one cut on each side of the door. It makes the installation really quick and simple. Okay, so this is going to be kind of how to install flooring for beginners. First, if you don't do this on a regular basis and you haven't got good callus on your knees, get yourself some knee pads, okay? These are really nice, they're soft, they don't have any hard cover on them, you're not rolling off all the time. Just make sure you're always sitting up nice and tall. The elastic straps that hold this on really tend to pinch if you're sitting down on your feet a lot. So try to avoid doing that. Next, remember there's two ends. There's one that's got just a square end here that's designed to drop on top of the lock, and there's the one here that's got the extension on the board. And because you want to install a floating floor with room to expand and contract, you've got to be careful, because if you put this right up against your baseboard, you've already got a gap, all right? So what you want to do is maybe start the flooring on the other end of the room, okay? And what I'm going to do is I'm going to show you a technique where we're going to build the first few rows, and then we're going to pull it off the wall where we want it, and then we're going to set a bunch of our wood on top of the floor to keep it from moving around while we build the rest of the room. So before we get started, we're going to remember that we want to have these joints moving and changing location on a regular basis. When we want to have the gaps, the distance between those joints significant enough that there's strength being transferred from one board to the next so that the floor doesn't come apart. Now, in order to do that, we want to remember that this area here with the tongue is going to be what we call the finished edge, the clean edge, and we want the cut to be on inside of the board. So I'm going to start off by cutting 3 boards, 3 different areas. And yes, this is my Roberts cutter. It's like a guillotine. Anybody can use this. Or like this. Like this. Or like this. Or like this. Just remember, when you're cutting with these tools, do it outside, the dust is horrible, and wear your safety glasses. I'll cut one board at half, one board at a third. Okay, and then one board at 2/3. And this gives me the ability to start 4 rows at a time. And that way, when I'm done these first 4 rows, then I can fix the spacing and put those other boards on top. Okay, so once you get started, there are basically 2 design options that you have. And here, I'll just lay them out real quick. One is it's a constant step. And you go from big board to smaller board. Oh. When you see junk like that, make sure you blow it out. You don't want to have anything in the joint. Okay, smaller board to smaller board to smaller board. Blah, 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 and then the whole process will start all over again. All right, so your floor is constantly stepping down. And that pattern reoccurs over the floor. Some people like that look. Personally, I think it looks a little bit too intentional and man-made, and I'm not a big fan. I like to mix it up a little bit. I like to go long, short, long, short. And that's just my preference. There's no real right or wrong way. Now we're going to show you the installation technique. So you put it in the groove, you slide it along to help make sure that you get good contact, and then drop it down, okay? And you'll notice that things aren't going to sit really snug right away. Just put some weight on one side and work this, pulling it in that direction while you're pushing down, and everything will sit nice. And then you put the next board on, and until we get some weight on this floor, it's going to want to move around. Okay, so you can use your leg. Just do it like that, and then we'll go short again. Now we have something we can work with. Now these first few offcuts, oddly enough, what I'm going to do with them is I'm going to just set them aside until near the end of the job, and we'll use these in the last few rows when we get to the other end of the room. I just don't like to have them in the way. All right, so we're at a point now where we're just about ready to get into production. We want to finish off our couple rows, and we always have our big tongue sitting in front of us, okay, as you're building. And so the way that you're going to measure from here to the wall is you turn the board in the reverse direction, set the board up to the wall, take a black magic marker, and right at the edge of this corner, I want you to take off a 1/4 inch, which is basically the extension of the tongue on the first board, plus another 1/4 inch. And you want to make that short on purpose. Here's why. That's going to be the gap. That second 1/4 inch gap, that's going to be the gap that's there for the floor for a little bit of expansion contraction. Now generally, if your house has conditioned space, like air conditioning and heating system, there's not a whole lot of expansion and contraction that goes on. But if you live in a house where you don't have air conditioning and you get a hot summer, then you're going to see that your floor will have varying degrees of how it fits. So remember, the hotter and more humid it is, the bigger your floor gets. So you can make your adjustment based on your condition. Some people go with a 1/2 inch gap around the outside of the room and use a 3/4 inch quarter round just because they're in extreme conditions. But traditionally, a 1/4 inch will do the job. Okay, so here we go. Now there's my offcut, all right? I don't need that now, but I'm going to use that to start another row over here, all right? This is how it works. So every time you cut a board, after you've done your first few and set them aside, every board you cut now, you put one in on one side and you start a row on the other side. And that way you don't have anything going in the garbage. Again, we'll just set that down and we'll grab another board. Now remember, I'm starting tight on the other wall, and so when we get the first few rows in, we'll slide it over and close the gap a little bit. But for now, we just want to get this nice and tight, and then we'll pull it across and then drop it down. And just giving it a little tap like that will help to manipulate everything into position. Here we go again. We'll set that against the wall. And we'll mark a 1/4 inch after the base. So there's the finished floor, there's the end of the rough floor. We'll add a gap and we'll mark our floor there. So here's our little piece. So everybody who is wondering, is that kind of cutter going to be able to cut me just a little piece? The answer is yes. It goes in the same way. Slide it over and then lay it flat. Done. And if you see the edge of the board has any damage, break it off and clean it out. Anything that's got damage like that isn't going to close properly. Just push it to the corner. Remember, you're going to be sweeping as you go. There we go. Now my space is shorter than the board. So again, I turn it around and I measure same way. There's my unfinished wood on the floor, finished board, and my gap. Mark it. Now most flooring, when you're clicking it together, they call it a click flooring because the flooring actually makes a click sound when it's sitting right. So this is going to be the secret. We're going to see if we can get the microphone on here to pick this up. There it is. Okay, there we go. There, that way everything fits perfect. Now the secret to doing a job like this is be 100% happy with everything you do before you go to the next one. If you're not happy with what you've just done, take it apart and try to figure out why you're not happy. You might find that something's not tight enough. There might be some debris in the gap, so it's not closing properly. But if you keep moving forward, there's no way to go back and fix it later. So we basically have our first 5 rows done. And before we go any further, what I'm going to do now is So I'm gonna just take this original cutoff piece here, put my weight back here and give it a tap. Now I'm damaging this board and it's fine. I'm gonna treat it like garbage. But what I wanna make sure is that the first few rows, everything is nice and tight. One of the things about the click lock system is just because it's in doesn't mean it's in perfect. It can open up and have a gap, right? So that's, that looks good. You hear that click? Okay, so that's down, there's a gap. Now listen, that's click lock, okay? And when you're doing the first few rows, it's hard to get that click sound because things aren't perfectly straight. So you need your first few rows before you can straighten it out. So what I suggest, before you go ahead, give everything a little bit of a love tap. Make sure everything's clicked in nice and tight. Then you won't be disappointed and your floor won't open up after the fact. Real quick, we better show you how to move your floor into position. Because remember, we want to have a consistent gap on both sides and the back wall. Now, after you do 5 rows, it can be pretty heavy. And you might find that the finish on the laminate is too slippery to get a good grip. And this is where tape comes in, okay? Literally hold the tape down and hold the edge of the tape and you can pull that floor right off the wall. All right? Now you can also push it, but if you try to pull it, it might be a little bit difficult for you. So use the tape. The other thing you can do, if you have a board that separates and you need to kick it back into position, just put a little bit of tape down. And the reason you want this helps give you a little bit of, little something for your shoe to kick on. And you can use that to manipulate your floor. Put that into position, okay? So we'll check our gap on both ends. I'm liking that. There, perfect. So now, to keep this from moving around on us, we want to add weight. Each of these boxes weighs approximately 60 pounds, okay? And when you're done packing all of the rest of the flooring for the room on there, you're doing 2 things. A, you're getting it out of the way because you're installing a floor in the room, and B, you're putting enough weight on that floor that you've just put down and put into position to keep it from moving around. Now remember, because this is a drop and lock system, we don't need to use a hammer anymore. Now that we've got it started and straightened out, we've got it all tightened up, now we're ready to go and build ourselves a floor. Now it's time for the time lapse. And then we'll be able to show you the tips and tricks for dealing with around the doors and fitting your doors after the fact. Most likely some of these will need to be cut down. Okay, so we're done there, basic square footage of the room. Now we've come into a couple of places where it's nice to talk about finishing details. You can see it only took us about 20 minutes, maybe 30. You know, so if you're new to this and you're just starting it for your first time, maybe expect that to take about an hour. But I tell you, once you get used to the cutting and you get a rhythm going, we can get doing that pretty quick. And if you have a helper, it makes it all that much faster. So here we are. This is what we call quarter round. And if you look at it, it looks like 1/4 of a piece of pie. That's what it's basically called. And we use this as our trim molding to close up from floor to baseboard. All right? And the way we do it is the inside corner is going to get mitered at a 45-degree angle. And over here, we're going to bring it right up to where the door casing meets. Okay, so we're just going to make a pencil mark here where the door casing is. And we're going to cut this one on 30 degrees. And that opens it up a little bit nice like that. Looks clean, looks finished. If it's cut square, it looks stupid. So it's a nice soft angle and it'll work really well. And what we use to install it is a brad nailer. And we're just using 1¼ inch nails. Now this setup here with an air tool with a gun, the hose, and the compressor, you can actually get at the local Home Depot, the Husky machine. I think when I bought it, it came with the hose and a nail gun. I can't remember exactly, but I think the whole outfit is less than $200. And of course, once you have a hose, you can get interchangeable tools. You can get your stapler for the 1/4 inch plywood. You can get ratchets, so you can do power tools to work on your cars as well. So having a compressor, the compressor itself is $100. You don't need to spend a fortune on these kinds of tools. I'm rough on it. I probably go through one a year because I don't treat it well. But for me, to have something that is that versatile for $100 a year, that is just money in the bank. As a homeowner, if you actually take care of your tools, it'll last you a lifetime, okay? So you can do all the trimming in your house, all your finished carpentry, anything you need. And you can also put a little blower on the end of this, and you can use it as an air broom. And you can clean things off and clean the dust out of the room, clean out your computer and everything else with that too. So very handy. Definitely suggest having that. That's one of those tools that every homeowner should have if you're gonna do DIY. You don't want to spend your day running around with little finishing nails and a hammer, trying to hammer all these trims in like it's 1950. That'll just take you forever, and you're going to waste your whole weekend doing something that could be done in about 10 minutes. All right, so here we go. Once we got our measurement, we just run down to the saw, cut it, stick it in place, throw one of these brad nails in every 16 inches, every 2 feet, and we're done. So let's talk transition, because this is the one place in the whole room where homeowners always do it wrong, and it screams DIY. They don't cut the casing and slide the floor underneath. And the reason for that is they probably just don't know what tool to use or how to get that job done properly. Or maybe you've hired somebody to do some work in your house before and they were lazy and didn't do it properly. But here's the secret. Take your flooring, put it upside down, and you buy one of these. Now this is called a dovetail saw, okay? Because of the way that you can hold the handle flush on the ground and still cut without rubbing your knuckles off. It's also reversible, left and right. You push this down and you swing it around, and then it locks in position to cut the other way. Okay? So all we do is set it on top of the flooring. And the reason we use this piece upside down is just to measure the depth. And this is not about strength, it's about speed, okay? It's a fine-tooth saw. And once you get to the jamb, which is this material here, you can stop or you can keep going. You can cut right through the whole jamb, it doesn't really matter. But the goal is to get to the other side of this casing clean through. So you're probably gonna be cutting some of your baseboard as well, and that's fine. There's no damage gonna be caused here by doing this. And when you get near the end, instead of trying to put all your force on the front, try to use the push against the heel like this kind of motion, and then you'll get the back of that cut off. All right? And the way you can tell if it's done, just take your trusty knife. There's probably some caulking and adhesive in there. Here we go. There we go. Now, we got the whole thing. It might be just a little bit left. And you can take your knife and cut that little bit of trim left. Once you got it all cleaned out, now you'll see your flooring will slide underneath your trim, and you'll get a perfectly clean line, and there's no need for caulking. This is absolutely beautiful. If you add caulking to this after the fact, you're actually going to make it look ugly. So it detracts from the situation. Remember, the only reason they use caulking in the first place is because somebody cut the hole too big and they had to close the gap. So if you use this kind of fine-tooth saw, the saw blade itself is so thin, it's like microscopic, the difference that's going to be left in your floor. Now, if you don't have one of these, you can go to the store for about 20 bucks and pick one up. Or if you have a PVC saw, same effect. It's a fine-tooth saw, thin blade. This is a cheap little pull saw from Irwin. Fine-tooth saw, same effect. All you do is just set the floor there, and you can do the same effect, okay? That'll do the same thing. All right, these are 10 bucks. They're a little flimsy, but if you're a DIY homeowner, sometimes it's not what you can buy, but what you can use that works. So as long as it's a fine-tooth flexible saw, same process, you'll have a great result too. Let's talk about our transition. Now, this flooring is only going in this room. I'm not carrying it into the rest of the house. We're using a different flooring for that. So there will be a transition. And the rule of thumb is this: when you're doing a transition anywhere in your flooring, you want that transition to be right in the middle underneath the door. So here I'll show you. Here's the door jamb. This represents the outside of the door. That represents the inside of the door. You want your flooring to go right to the middle where the transition is. Except, since this is a laminate product, the transition is going to look different. It's going to be about a ½ an inch wide. It's going to be a metal track that goes screwed down to the floor. Okay? And then there'll be like a T-molding, and it'll snap into that metal track and it'll go over top of each of the laminates. So in fact, we want to go right to the jamb with our flooring, okay? We don't want to go into this area because the transition itself will bridge the gap from here to here. Knowing that, because transitions traditionally are 1.5 inches, a door is 1.25 inches. So as long as your flooring comes up to the edge of that, you're going to be fine, all right? So in order to do this, same thing, we turn this around, we put our finished floor there, okay, and we're going to mark right there. We're going to cut exactly to fill here. And in this particular case, we're not going to use our guillotine because we want to get a nice clean cut. In this situation, I'm going to use the chop saw. So here's our 1/4 round, and here's our mark with our 30 degree. So we're going to set our saw to 30 degrees. I'm going to lock it in place. I'm just going to set my blade up. There we go, that's done. And then I'm going to push this all the way to the other side. Set it to 45, which is my inside corner miter. And the idea here is I want the blade to cut from the tip going down, so I don't make it any shorter. Now that piece is ready to install. So here's the piece of flooring. This is the one that goes into the room, and this is where we're going to finish off at the door. Now just a note, this baked on finish here that comes from the factory, this is a lot stronger than the kind of finish that you get on a site finish floor. This is baked on, it's very much an enamel. You want to cut your board standing up when you can, okay? If you're going to use the saw for cutting your wood, get it standing up, line up your saw, and you'll see that you bang into it, you're going to have to move the guard out of the way. Get the saw starting and go slow. There you go. Now that's a finished cut I can live with. Perfect. Now as a rule, when I'm doing flooring, I like to do my 1/4 round as it's available. Probably an OCD issue, to be perfectly honest, but it's just nice to see it cleaned up and finished. So what you do is you put your gun in the middle and you push down and then you roll it towards the inside a little bit. Okay? You don't actually want to nail through the flooring into the subfloor, and you don't want to ever nail underneath an electrical plug in case the wire is coming up from underneath. Move away and just put one every, whoops, 16 inches every 2 feet, just to make sure it's nice and tight. Because this is a click laminate floor, you can actually cheat here just a little bit. You see here, we can set it on top of the groove and then slide it towards it. All right, now it's not going to want to sit in there perfectly. So what you have to do is you got to lift this side just a little bit so you can get this one to click in. And you can really pull and find that it's not going to happen. Every once in a while you're going to want to hammer something. Keep a little cut off handy. Okay. And the reason this works great is because the contour of the tongue and groove is exactly the same, so you aren't going to damage the face of the board. Done, locked, perfect, nice and clean, right up to where the transition is going to be. That's how you finish a floor. This is easy. From this side of the flooring, you get your body low, get your angle in, slide it over, put your fingers in there in the groove, pull while you wiggle down. Perfect every time. When you're on this side of the wood, it's so much easier. That's why when you're starting, it takes a little time, but from this side, it's just that easy. So you'll see, as I was laying the flooring here, what it is, I just marked where the floor grate is. And to make my life simple, I'm going to cut it out after the fact. I just find it easier to install. All right, bring my jigsaw over, set the blade in that hole. And I'm using a 3-inch bit, just so you know, 3/8. And then we just go. Okay. And this is why I like to do it after the fact, because I can cut this perfect every time. Okay, so we are about, I don't know, 2/3 way through this project now. And that's as far as the flooring is concerned. We've got a few more details left I want to discuss, and these are really important. One of them is your doors. You need to consider, do the doors still function after the new floor is in? And you want to know that in advance, because if you bring your flooring right up to the door and then it won't open, it's really difficult to get it back out again. So do a double check, make sure you got some space. Okay, this door is not going to clear. And so what we're going to do is I'll show you my system. I'll lay a piece of flooring in front of it. And if you want to take a good look at this pencil, if I hold it like that, I actually get an extra almost 1/4 inch. I'll hold it like that and mark the door on top of the flooring so that when I cut this door, I'm not just cutting it to barely fit, I'm cutting it so that it will completely work. And I'm also going to double check with the door open, because old houses are notorious for having different heights and different variations. So just double check, and here it actually clears. So we know that we're opening from a high spot to a low spot. So if I take that door off and I cut it in that position, it's going to function wonderful. So we want to get that out of the way right away. So the way I remove my hinge pins is I use a drill bit. Just come at it from the side here. Once you get a little bit, you can just use the claw and the hammer, pop it out, and you're good to go. And just, here we go. We're gonna get this right out of the room. And when we're all finished, then I'm gonna set up and I'll cut the door and I'll show you how to get that reinstalled. So now that we've got all the tools reconfigured, we've changed our workstation, we're putting our cutting station, I've got a moving blanket down here on the floor. Just because it's a new floor and it's got a nice durable finish doesn't mean you want to be taking any chances. So always cover your new floor surface when you're working on it. And this gives us a chance to just catch up with our sweeping again. Remember, preparation, preparation. As we're working, we're creating dirt and blowing dust around. So now's a great time to just clean your surface one more time before we go to finish off. Okay, so really, there's only 2 steps left to doing a floor that you're going to need to know, and that's one is the closet area. It has a unique challenge that's associated to closets, and that is your closets usually come and build into the room. So now we have this wall dividing one section of flooring to the other. And because we're coming this way, we're going to have this intersection that you need to think, you need to pay attention in advance and come up with a strategy for doing this. Because as you can see, this board goes in here, and that's nice and lovely, right? Done. We can cut and install that last piece. And then I can put in that board. What about this one? You know, am I just supposed to take a jigsaw and cut the middle out and try to hammer it in? I can't do that, okay? So what you want to do is realize that in this situation, you're going to want to install the floor from the middle, going in both directions, which is a little contrary to what we've been showing. And there's a secret to doing this. So you plan to go from 2 different directions. Because it's a drop block, this board you want to start right here off the jamb, okay? And this board is the one you want to cut and measure first. And if you cut and measure that board first and get that installed from that side and then use a tapping block to push it underneath the trim, we used our saw and cut all that trim out, okay? We actually took our dovetail saw and cut all the way through the entire casing, all the way up through the baseboard, all the way around this side, okay? The reason we can do that is because we're going to be adding that shoe mold on all the base. And so it's not going to cause us any trouble, but it will give us the flexibility to push this trim, to push this flooring underneath. So what I want to do is I want to measure here first, get my marker, mark my spot where it'll slide underneath the baseboard and the casing. Just to make sure I'm going to be okay, I want to measure from the jamb to the flooring. It looks like my mark is 2 3/4. Okay, good. I've got lots of room. Okay, and then I want to bring this right up until my finished edge is in line with this jamb, because that's what that's going to connect to. All right, and you can just kind of eyeball this to begin with, right there. And then we can cut this just past the corner. Remember, we're going to use shoe mold. We're quarter round here, so it doesn't matter. Give ourselves a little bit of room. And then set my marker. And then I'll just pull. Okay? Now I have my cut. And I'm just going to run down to my skill saw set up outside. And of course it's outside because that dust is really brutal. And I'll cut this piece, and then we can come, we'll install it, measure and cut the other piece. And I'll show you all the tricks so you can finish this off. We're going to start with the middle of the floor instead of the edge. We'll get it up to where we want it. Get it into our groove properly. Lock it in place. Now, what we want to do is take our hammer and take one of your short offcuts, line it up underneath, and then use the cutoff area as a tapping block. Remember that the contour of the tapping block exactly matches the rest of the laminate. So if you leave it flush to the ground and you hold this together, you'll have a perfect transfer of energy without causing any damage. Now you can see it's underneath the contour here, so no caulking necessary. Anywhere here, we're going to get the quarter round shoe mold. So you can cut yourself a little bit generous on the back side here. Make sure you have lots of room to make this joint. And again, get it in place. Perfect. Because this is a click lock, you can actually lift this edge a little bit so you can get this in. Okay, and just give it a yank. Snap it in. Boom, done. Look at that, that's beautiful. Now we can go back with our cutoffs. Make sure you establish your gap at the wall. Wiggle, wiggle, wiggle. And then this is just a matter of measuring cut to finish. So here we are, we're gonna do another quick little time lapse. We're gonna get to the end of the project. We're gonna do all the cuts and starts and finishes, make sure our Hing, which we call it, which is our joint lines, are staggered and mixed and look nice. Okay, so now we're pretty much down to the last step, aside from cutting the door, which is coming up next, for installing your floors up against the wall. Obviously, the gap that's left is not consistent with the width of the board, so we can't use our cutting tool. We can't use our chop saw to cut this wood, so we need to do something else. Now, I'm going to suggest if you have a table saw, that's the best tool for the job. You could also use a skill saw. You can actually take this board and you can clamp it to something else and then run your skill saw and cut the piece off. You could use a jigsaw if you had to. But the point is, anything that will cut something long and in a straight line will do fine. You're not going to see the cut line because it's going to be covered by that quarter round that we showed earlier. So don't be too concerned about how perfect this is. And give yourself a little bit of space to work with, all right? The biggest mistake people make here is they make it too tight. And then they have to fight with it to get it in. They damage their baseboards. And then they're gonna have issues with the expansion and contraction because it's too tight. So the first thing you wanna do is find your two pieces, get them measured and cut to length so they can fit comfortably in the space. And now you have your template, okay? Now it's time for measuring tape. I'm gonna measure from wall to here, not to here, all right? And that'll make a smaller space than what you need, and it'll leave that 1/4 inch gap that you wanna have after you're done installing your flooring. So measure your gap, which here, to the finished flooring is 1 3/4 inches, but to the extension of the groove here, it's only 1.5 inches. And then you're gonna take your measuring tape and measure from finished flooring to 1.5 inches and make your mark. Okay? Does that make sense? So we're actually measuring the smallest part of the gap and cutting from finished flooring, so we left with the 1/4 inch on when we're all finished. Here it is, 1.25 inches, 1.5 to 1.25 inches. So at each end, it's a different depth. So I have 1.25 inches on one end, 1.5 inches on the other. Take one of your flooring boards and set it up. And this is one of the reasons why you want to take that 1/4 inch off. It's nice to have a little bit of mercy here, okay? Connect your dots and that'll be your cutting line for your table saw. All right? Now this one, it's a little bit simpler. It's just 1.5 inches on both sides. That one you can just make your mark, set your fingers in the groove, and pull. Okay, so now we have our 2 pieces. We're gonna go down to the table saw, we'll get that ripped, and then we'll come in and drop them in. And when drop them in, I mean literally the same process. You're gonna set your tongue in the groove, and you're just gonna give it a wiggle as you set it down. And that's all there is to it. Okay, so the last step of the flooring before we cut the doors and install them is just to lay down the strips that we cut. Of course, we cut it short on purpose. Remember to watch your gap at the end. And you just lay it in. Now, this is not completely done. It's not set down tight. So use your knife. Get a little forward pressure, okay, while you're pushing down. There we go. And if you're not sure if it's down enough, you can always just go like this with the tap block. Give it a shot. That'll lock it in nice and tight. Remember, you're gonna have quarter round going on here to cover it all up. So don't be too picky. Don't be too hard on yourself. As long as you can see the gap closing, see? See the gap closing? Push it down. When you push it down, if the gap opens, push it forward again until you can push on it without the gap opening up. There we go, we got the click action. You heard that? Click, click, there. When you hear that noise, you know you're good as gold. And then you just take your quarter round and cover it all up. So one of the benefits of this product is now the room is done, and that's the only garbage we're throwing out. I love not buying material that goes in the garbage. Okay, so here's a little bonus feature for this video. And it's kind of necessary because in a lot of cases when you're adding a 12mm laminate, you need to cut your doors down. Okay, so because we marked the surface of the door that you're going to see from the room, before you get started, you're going to want to protect the door, especially if it's already finished paint, from the marks caused by the saw. Okay, if this is a bifold door and you're not going to see the back side of it and you can mark the back side instead, I would suggest to do that. But in this situation, these kind of circular saws have a steel plate, and that's what keeps it from going all wild and wonky on you. And that steel plate is going to be dragging across your finished paint and make a mess. So cover it up in some tape real quick. Here's our pencil line. You're going to want to set the depth of your saw relatively the same as the door. It'll decrease the amount of chipping that it's going to cause. And doors are 1.25 inches, so we'll set this off for 1.5 inches. That'll be more than enough. Make sure that you're gonna get past your hinge, or you'll have to cut from the other side, and that's a little trickier. Here we go. Now we can set up our mark here. This saw in particular, that line, that 0, is where the blade is gonna cut and remove. So we can set that right on our pencil line. Set the blade depth on that almost too perfect. All right, now we can remove our tape. Our door's in great shape. We can use that just to rub the door real quick so that it's nice and sanded. That's it, time to stick it back on. All right, so generally, when I remove a door, I leave the pins nice and handy. And all you do, stick the top in. All right, and then you can work on the bottom. There we go. Perfect. Sometimes they have a core that's about 1 inch or so. And when you cut that off, you can actually peel the face of the door off the core and reinstall it with glue and a couple of nails. In this situation, that core has been cut because it's already a custom door. It's been thrown out. Now we're cutting it again. If there was any core left, it'd be so small it wouldn't have been worth worrying about. But if you have the time and energy and you still have a core, by all means, feel free to reinstall it. If you're worried about spiders or mice or whatever getting up in the door, making a home there, you can always use a little low foam expansion window and door foam, and you can seal the bottom of your door and then trim it off later. Well, thank you for joining us in this comprehensive instructional video for how to install laminate flooring, especially the click version. A lot of the tips and tricks in this are good for vinyl or hardwood and other types of laminate as well. But we just wanted to make sure that if you're going to be able to start this project at home, you've got all the tools you need so that you can finish it like a pro. Now, I know that advice might be shocking to some of you, but the reality is there is no such thing as the right way to renovate for everybody. It's what's right for you. Sometimes, based on budget and the condition of where you're living, we've got to make decisions that aren't ideal. And nobody's in the marketplace going, this is what you can get away with and what kind of life expectancy you can get out of a project like that. So I'm going to be here and I'm going to answer questions honestly. The truth is that our technology and our building materials is so amazing, you can get away with a lot. All right. Now, you don't want to do a lot of these kinds of things if it's structural, if you're going to be walking on it. But if it's just a backsplash, I'm going to suggest that you can do a bit of a cheat there and get away with it. And it will save you a lot of time and aggravation. And you can do it yourself. Remember, the simplest tile installation is actually the smaller tile, the better. You can actually install a backsplash made out of 1x1 mosaic, and you can install it using scissors to cut around your electrical plugs and oversized electrical cover plates. You can do that yourself. You don't even need to buy tile tools because it's all in a mesh back, and you can use scissors to cut the mesh. The smaller the tile, the more ceramic it is, the easier it is to install, the cheaper it is, and you can get a great look. So I'm going to suggest, if you're in a budget position where it's not always doable, you can still get it done, all right? So if you've got questions and stuff like that, put it in the comment section. Don't forget, ask in the comment section right now, actually, what about this? What about that? Let's talk about all the dirty little cheat secrets that are out there that help extend the life of a project before you have to invest a ton of money renovating, because I think there's gonna be a lot of people in the near future who are gonna be in that situation. COVID has actually caused quite a financial rift for a lot of homes. So if you're looking for maintenance or you're looking for update ideas that are on the lower cost side, maybe considered cheats or hacks, feel free to put them in the comment section. Ask me if it's doable and I can give you a little bit of feedback. Now, I'm not going to guarantee it's going to last forever, but if you're looking for a way to extend the life of your project a few years, there's a ton of things to do to get that done. All right, guys, well, listen, that is a great way to remodel a kitchen, right? It's all of the major elements. You just throw in a paint job and you're good to go. And remember, if you're going to be remodeling a kitchen and doing these kind of processes, some people in the marketplace are going to call it cheats. It's not the right way to do things. There is no such thing as the right way to do anything, all right? It's just what's right for you. So if you're in a marketplace where that's your budget and you'd like to get that kind of result, then go right ahead. I'm going to empower you to do so. There's nothing wrong with that. Thanks for watching. Don't forget to give us a like and a thumbs up really is what it is. Hit the button. Subscribe to the channel if you haven't yet, because we're going to be teaching you all kinds of tips and tricks to remodel, renovate, and improve your home. And you can check out this video over here. We did a complete A to Z on my farmhouse. And in that video, I'm telling you, it covers all the bases for a major renovation, and you can do it yourself, semi-custom kitchen, and make a lot of money doing it. We'll see you in the next video.